Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn the Hunter. Sejohn.
Hey, Dev. I just want to take the opportunity to say congratulations on behalf of the Say Report to Wicked for finally crossing the biggest milestone of its existence so far. It has officially this week by about $1 million finally passed Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. It is at 477 million. Quantumania is sitting at 476 million, so it is officially making a little bit more money than Quantumania.
I really love this character that Sejohn has adopted. This is everybody who listens' first experience with it, but he's been playing this character for about a week and a half in all of our...
It's not a character. It has been a countdown for me. It has been. I have one of those big old posters on the wall with a big thermometer in it, and I have Paul Rudd's happy smiling face at the top and Michael Douglas's grumpy face, and it's just been slowly building up with green, of course, all the way to it, and just this week it finally hit the top. And I'm real proud of Wicked for finally making as much money as Quantumania. Now the real reason that I've really been so fascinated by this is just the fact that everybody has just been talking about what a runaway success Wicked is, and that is buck wild to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. As soon as you started talking about Wicked in terms of Quantumania, I mean, as much as I act like I was annoyed by it, you really opened up this window for me. It's like to totally navel gaze right here. It's like when you're working with a professional stage light and you have all the shutters in. It's like you pulled open the shutters and the light got that much brighter and clearer and a little less focused, but still.
I am real deep down this rabbit hole, Dev. Like, I've even got, there are some things to talk about in this specific conversation. So if you'll forgive me for just kind of just rolling into some shit.
Before we roll into some
where
shit,
my head has been.
I just need to apologize. I did not get a chance to watch Hot Frosty. So if you are a listener who is here to hear the Say Report take on Hot Frosty, probably next episode. No promises. Well,
I'll tell you what.
Though.
I was pleasantly surprised yesterday to find Red One available for free to me as a Prime membership.
27 days after opening wide in theaters.
So I'm gonna watch Red One. I even have plans today. You know, wild. The second that went up on Prime for to watch, I have plans now with 3 different groups of people to watch this movie. Couldn't fucking find anybody that wanted to go see it with me in the theater, but now that it's available at home and available with their Prime membership that they've already got, especially this time of year for Christmas, kind of like exactly what we talked about. Like, why the fuck was this movie coming out when it did?
I mean, yeah, well, anyway. And to be fair, and it was supposed to just be a Prime release that then, I believe, Dwayne, we need to show this in theaters. So, I don't know. But roll into everything about Quantumania.
That's the first I had heard about that. We're gonna watch Red One this weekend, or I'm gonna watch Red One this weekend. We will definitely be talking about that. You should check out Hot Frosty, and then we can talk about that. Let's talk about a movie we have both seen. Yes. And by all accounts, from the conversations that I've had, I'm going to lay this out here right now. Both enjoyed, right? I had a good time with this movie.
I enjoyed Wicked so much I'm fucking mad that I have to wait a year to see the end of Wicked. Because
it's funny that we mentioned that, Dev. Because here's where the numbers game comes back. There's this big thing right now where, as I mentioned, they had just passed the $477 million mark, right? And they're going to continue to make money. Like, as much shit as it sounds like I'm giving it for only just getting past Ant-Man and the Wasp, that was its entire run. Wicked still has some time left. So it's clearly going to make some more cash.
And before we go further, there is the fact that Wicked is threatening us, and it feels like a threat. It doesn't feel like a promise. It doesn't feel like wishful thinking. It has threatened us from the beginning, with the sing-along version being released on Christmas Day.
To just remind everybody, hey, go back to the theaters and see Wicked again. Which I'm sure it's going to get. It's going to get a Christmas bump.
Oh, it's totally going to get a Christmas bump. It's going to get a Theater Kid energy bump. And all of that, despite it technically being a separate release of the film, will count towards its original run earnings. Because Hollywood accounting, baby.
Just like when they re-released Spider-Man with more footage,
with
they
stuff
counted back towards it and stuff. Yeah, but the big thing about Wicked that is going to come up if you start digging into the numbers, as I've been doing, is that Ant-Man and the Wasp had something like a $350 million budget, $380 million, I think it was the final budget. And as far as I can tell, that included marketing in that conversation. Maybe not. Wicked supposedly only had a $150 million budget, but that number comes from the fact that actually Wicked, as a production, had a $350 million budget, but they cut the movie in two. And so budget reporting now is reporting each half of the movie, each half of Wicked, with half of the budget. So a wild assumption to make because that's not how movie making works, especially when you're making both movies at the same time, especially when you didn't think you were going to cut the movie in half to begin with, right?
Imagine if
So
we got a
actually, it
5-hour
cost.
movie. At minimum, it'd have to be 5 hours. Continue. Sorry, I'm sorry
But no, but consider that, right? Is that like it gets to tout this? It gets to live in this world where it is $150 million movie made 450, a little bit more, $475 million, wherever it's going to eventually land, right? It gets to say that it made that much more than its budget. Now, that's only half its budget. Then add to that that there's also been a reported thing going on. This I cannot truly verify, but Universal seemed to be kind of on throwing this out there themselves, saying, "Hey, we spent more money on the marketing for this movie than we have on any other movie before." So $350 million in marketing has been put behind Wicked. Now, but I think they
And
use a very
really, all they
specific
had to
term
do was
here.
put the wrong website on the toys, and they'd get a bunch of free advertising.
They yeah. The term specifically that they use is a $350 million worth of marketing. So who knows what that means, right? Worth of marketing could mean a whole. This is where the whole Hollywood budgeting shit starts to get. It is still a fucking mess, I guess, is what I'm getting at, right? We have talked about this now for years on this show. People seemed to be talking about it more in the zeitgeist, as especially while we were at home, and people talking about the various ways in which movies were being brought to them suddenly, and how they were hearing about movies and not hearing about movies. This conversation of like what is a movie actually making. Dwayne the Rock Johnson, who we just brought up, was stuck in the middle of a really wild story version of this with Black Adam, which we have said before. So we're not gonna repeat ourselves a million times. But whereas though they kept talking about the cost of Black Adam being a certain amount of money, and then it came out many 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 months later that they had overinflated that amount by adding in certain things and saying certain things about the movie that just weren't true. So it actually ended up making money, but nobody knows that now because as far as anybody knows at the time, they were being told that it was a huge loss for DC, when in fact it was actually the last movie of DC's to actually make any cash. DC WB, DCEU, whatever way they want
DCEU.
to refer
That
to
is the
it.
thing. As we now have 3 episodes showing us what the DCU will look like. And has it changed everything? I don't know, but we'll talk.
Wait, but what are they going to do as far as budget comparisons and stuff go? Are James Gunn's movies going to get the same amount of money as movies did in the past? Probably not, because of the things that have happened. But then, like, what happens if they make more money? It's going to be the ways in which people talk about money with all of this stuff is just fucking ridiculous. And the ways in which that conversation, that ridiculous conversation, then bleeds into the way people remember a film is just fucking nuts. Because to this day, I have seen videos posted on YouTube of like VFX artists being like, I fixed Quantum Mania by going in and changing MODOK's face. Or like you watch somebody talk about the biggest failures of 2023 or whatever, that like, or the reason the MCU is dead is because this movie killed it. And they will point to this movie. And they will point to Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania being kind of like the key like tipping point in a lot of ways for people. And so if we're going to use that as the point of comparison, to hear all of those conversations going on, and then to look at the ways in which Wicked is being held up and praised as this just like wonderful film movie experience, that we don't want to talk about the budget, like it tells you everything that you need to kind of know about the ways in which people consume this stuff. In that, like, people were, I think this really just comes down to the same old story of just fatigue, right? And right now, we've kind of we had some musical fatigue for a little bit there. Les Mis, I think, kind of really kicks some stuff off with people kind of raising their eyebrows and some choices made for that, but it still made a bunch of money. But then Cats really being kind of the big example, I think, of people really losing their shit. Into the Woods also kind of raised some eyebrows for some people as well. But I think Cats is the one that we would point to as like, that's the one where people were just like, no, I'm done. I don't need to go see this, right? And like, it's just it is wild that we are seeing the pendulum swing back on musicals. I'm not hearing anybody really talk about that. The ways people are like celebrating this film right now, nobody's talking about the fact that they are going to get to make a bunch of money off of the same movie twice because they cut it in half, which is a trick that we have seen once or twice before in movie history, but like it is super egregious and in our face right now, like right what's going on with Wicked. It's just it is a weird pool to be like stepping into with the kind of conversations that we tend to have and that I feel that like our audiences kind of find themselves in like social media spaces and when they're talking to people at like their jobs and things like that and work, you know, that they find themselves talking to people about like these movies being not worth going to or not good or any of this, where most of the time the people that they're talking to maybe have never really engaged with the material or engaged with it in bad faith and like all of this sort of stuff. And it's making my head spin right now because I enjoyed my time with Wicked and I sat there and enjoyed that movie. And I sat there and I thought exactly what you did. Why the hell am I waiting a year to see the rest of this story? I mean, I understand that it would have probably ended up being a 5-hour experience with everything that they did leave in. But I saw Wicked with a bunch of people that are from that fandom that have been since the original show, and all they could talk about was I didn't know how they were going to make the first half 3 hours long, but then they added a bunch of waiting.
Yup.
They added a bunch of like pauses and moments of just like wait, like letting stuff like kind of linger for a bit and like yeah, some moments where popular, like you feel like okay, why are we
quick time out here for station identification, and that station is WSPL. Spoilers, baby. We are spoiling shit this episode. I'm not just talking about Wicked. I'm talking every single topic that we bring up in the 413th episode of the Say Report is gonna have spoilers related to it. Because I can't hold it in on this stuff. Wicked has been out for almost a month, and we're gonna spoil some things. I just want to make sure that we say that because Sejohn talks about like waiting and pauses and stuff. Popular, right? Which is a very popular song from the stage production Wicked. There are moments where literally nothing is happening, but it is still somehow the musical performance. I'm talking like it's just them on screen not doing anything, but Popular is still happening. It's weird.
Yeah, like there's extended musical breaks that are, from my understanding, not part of the original like show and stuff. I've come to realize that I did see Wicked once completely disinterested and did not enjoy my time with it while I was there. To be fair, at the time, like I was 20 something when it was out and popular, so I was being shitty about like the fact that we were even at the experience. I engaged in bad faith, right? Like at that time, and I like completely recognized that, and I knew that even before going into this movie. I was like, I'm happy to be giving Wicked an actual honest try this time, and so like with that, there were moments that even I was just watching this, and I was like, am I wrong in remembering that we're only just getting here now, and this was something that happened in like the first 30 minutes when I saw the show? Yeah, no, sure enough, there's just these moments that they just want to like. I mean, you know, you could argue it's good filmmaking. They want to linger on characters and they want to let reactions land and they want to do this. But then there's other moments where they've just like extended the dance break for this. Like in this particular song, we're going to add, you know, another minute's worth of breaks so that we can see more silly dancing. And like, and I'm not saying silly dancing as in like, oh, dancing is silly and I'm not interested in watching it. There's good dancing in this movie. There's also silly dancing in this movie.
If we're going to call this movie honestly 2 hours and 30 minutes long, right? Giving 17 minutes to the credits, right? Because I think it's 2:47 is the actual runtime, something like that. But let's make it a nice round number, like 2 hours and 30 minutes. 30 minutes of that is dancing through fucking life. And I don't know why. I like the song Dancing Through Life. I think it's an important introduction to Fiyero as a character, and it's got some heavenly foreshadowing for stuff that happens to his character in the second half of this thing. But there's no reason that Dancing Through Life had to be 30 minutes of this 2 hour and 30-minute production. A fifth of this is dancing through life. And it's ridiculous. Especially because, like, it's such a heavy focus and things that they do, but then when you see the second part, you're not going to have the benefit of just having watched that 30 minutes of setup for the character. It's wild to me. Like, I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. The library set piece is wonderful. And when they finally went to the Oz Dust Ballroom, which it really kind of bothers me that the Oz Dust Ballroom is not in Oz. It doesn't make it. The Emerald City. I guess it is technically in Oz. But, like, it just feels so like, what is this dance club in, like, the outskirts of the fucking land of Oz?
Yeah, it's wild because as a concept, I don't know what the like they're not supposed to be there, right? Like that's the whole bit. Is they're not supposed to leave campus. Really, is what the big thing is. They're not supposed to leave campus at all.
Well, they're first years. You don't get permission to leave campus till your third year, Sejohn.
So they run off, right? Like they run off from campus to go to a club and do that, and I can appreciate that. I guess I did not understand the choice or the reasoning or the need to make it look like they were like it. Basically, my problem with it is it looked like they were in the rave from the Matrix.
A little bit,
Once they got into that area, I was just like, did the WB just want to reuse some set pieces here?
No, it's clearly like a crystal cave.
On this movie.
I just don't know what was going on the ceiling. Like, what was supposed to be like? Is there animals in there? Are we in like a frozen cavern and those are fish above them? I had questions about the Oz Dust Ballroom.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie about that. Because, like, for me, it always was like this super stuffy place. And then a bunch of kids who are not supposed to be there show up and they kind of re-inject the fun into it. And again, there's another moment. I had always
imagined it. I had always imagined it from the Gregory Maguire books. I don't think that they even refer to it. I don't know how deeply they get into specifically where they're at, but like that the places that they are in are these like magnificent, beautiful kingdom-esque places, right? Yeah. And it just felt so much like I guess it fits with what they're trying to say. Is it felt so much like it was an underground club, like they literally made it underground, right? They just hit it so on the nose, and like this is getting into some like weird like choice stuff that may or may not be ghosting from the show, may or may not just be just some wild interpretations by John Chu, but like there is some choices made throughout the making of this movie that only serve to really kind of lengthen your time with it, and at some point, knowing what we know, to go back to the budget conversation that I was having, just to kind of get my like to put a button on that.
Yeah.
Like, were they beefing it out so they could justify cutting it in half? Because if they didn't and they cut it and it was only like an hour, it would probably be a 2 hour long movie.
Probably 2 hours,
2 hour and 40-minute movie. Like, would people be like, well, this is stupid, they should have just put it out all at once? Whereas, I know a lot of people, like as you just said, Dev, not saying that you're saying this because I know you would sit down for a 5 hour movie, but the idea being that I know there are people that would be like, well, if they had put the 5 hour version out, I wouldn't have gone to that. So they needed to cut it in half. But my point being, it doesn't need to be 5 hours long in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got into a fight about this movie when I said it's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, and that's only the first act. And it's like, oh, so like once they put them together, the whole thing's going to be 2 hours and 40 minutes long. No, the first act, which is what is out in theaters right now, is 2 hours and 40 minutes long. And then there's going to be a second movie. We don't know how long that's going to be. It represents the second act of the show. And like someone just thought that was so absurd what I was saying. They thought that when all was said and done, when the two movies were released, the total runtime would be 2 hours and 40 minutes. Which kind of makes sense because when you go see it in a theater, it's a 3 hour experience with an intermission.
Right.
So like, I understood why like they were getting frustrated at me, and I'm like, no, I understand why you think that it should just be 2 hours and 40 minutes, but for some reason they split it into two movies. That's absurd. But rather than do what would be your experience if you went to go see this live, it is one part of that show that is the length of both parts of that show when you go to a live production of it. Like it's they were like, "You're not hearing me." I'm like, "Oh, I am hearing you. It's just you don't like the answer." Because the answer is absurd. You want to talk about another pregnant pause moment? Elphaba's whole entrance into the Ozdust ballroom is like, imagine the scene in The Last Jedi. And I am not, even though I don't like The Last Jedi, I am not saying this to cast any sort of aspersions on The Last Jedi. It is just a pinnacle cultural moment that I feel that I could hook my wagon to better make people understand what I'm about to say. That moment where they hyperdrive through the giant ship and the theater is silent, and it was silent like that people had to be told the movie is not broken, this is what's supposed to happen. That's what happens when Elphaba walks into the ballroom in what will become her Wicked Witch outfit. Like, it is silence. And it is that sequence, but then also somehow 3 times longer. Like, and then also, we're talking about spoilers. People were mad about the scene where Glinda, she's still Galinda at that point, Galinda and Elphaba dance at the Ozdust at like slow motion, and Elphaba has tear in her eyes. And they're like, that's such a spoiler. First of all, it is shown in the trailer, not necessarily a Sejohn's Gambit, because there's still somehow 45 minutes of movies left after this scene. Somehow there's still 45 minutes of movie that's going to happen after this. So it's not necessarily a Sejohn's Gambit. But, like, also, if you're at least a little bit familiar with Wicked, you know that Galinda and Elphaba eventually become friends. So, like, how is that a spoiler?
Think it's a spoiler that she's crying at that moment because it spoils that they actually end up liking each other?
Yeah, because that's like the moment where the shift happens. First of all,
I don't agree that it does that.
No, I
don't even agree that it does that.
Like, it was this whole, like, why would you ruin this scene for people? And I'm like, what? And then it happened in the movie, and I'm like, yeah, I thought that's all this was, right? It was like,
that's what the scene is supposed to be. They run off, literally after that moment, they run off together, and then that's when Popular happens.
Yes!
And like, the whole, like the whole, hey, we're friends now bit. Like, that is literally, it is the turning point of their relationship. That is a wild fucking thing to be upset about. I can't even believe that you would be mad about that.
Right. Because, and it was shared with the funny, like the tear, like, how are you going to say water kills her when she's crying? What's the true story? But we all know, I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what's going to happen in the second half of this movie. I mean, I know what happens in the second half of the play. I might be the only person who does. That cannot be true, because I've had conversations in the past about it, but every time I've had to have I've tried to have a conversation with somebody who has seen Wicked about Act 2, they're like, nobody remembers Act 2. Why would I want to talk about it? And it's like, you're not eliciting hope inside of me that the second movie is actually going to come out. That is my biggest fear, is that, like, for some reason the second movie doesn't happen. Like,
the only reason I think it would not is if suddenly everybody gets real wise to the fact that this movie is not actually making as much money as people seem to be assuming it is. It's not even that I feel like people are talking about it being a blockbuster hit, although I did see a couple of people call it a blockbuster because it did the old system of it made more than double its budget, therefore it qualifies as what we would call a blockbuster, which has long since gone out the fucking window, because now it's like, if it doesn't make $1 billion, we're not allowed to call it a blockbuster. But that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other kettle of
but
fish,
anyway,
that's a horse of another color. So
But if people suddenly kind of come around to the realization of what has been done here, is that they spent almost $350 million making this movie, supposedly double that when you add in this astronomical marketing budget that's been rumored, and then what they did is they realized, well, we can double our ticket prices on this if we just cut the movie in two. Which is something that they have, and we said this already, I think last week or a couple of weeks ago when we first
came out. Yeah,
that is something that has been thrown at every film that has been done in this way. but I hold up. I as much as people want to use to talk about how this is just a way to bilk fans out of more cash and all that stuff. Definitely a valid conversation to have. I do think there's legitimate reasons why you do this sometimes though, because I stand by the Deathly Hollows and breaking that movie in two with the ways that fandom, and me included, had gotten to a point with those movies being so kind of let down by the fact that by reality, if they
Yeah.
want these to be one movie and they want it to be a tight under 3 hour experience to get people in the seats and they want to keep getting people in there, but still have all of those classic moments that you want and hit all those emotional beats that you're expecting and give you what you want, then you have to accept the fact that this needs to be broken into two movies. The problem is it's always the legitimate cases like that that then feed the bullshit cases where you look at something like, say, Twilight, a movie that I will stand by as someone that has read the books and seen all of the movies multiple times on the movies, to be in fact, because actually I get a kick out of those movies. I don't know if I'm going to go see them in theaters when they re-release them next year, but that's a conversation for next year. But I, as somebody that has seen those movies multiple times, read those books, I still don't think that they ever needed to cut that Breaking Dawn into two movies. I don't understand why those two movies are two movies. It feels a lot, honestly, like Wicked, where you watch the first half of the first movie, part one, and you're just like, this doesn't need to be going on for this long. I would even venture to say that on the Twilight movies, there's a lot of stuff that happens that the audience just doesn't care about. Right? I won't say that with Wicked. I don't feel like there's any full scene that I feel is pointless, but I do feel that there's a lot of fluff and a lot of filler that I have to wonder, sitting here and knowing everything I know after reading everything I've read about what went on with the budget side of this movie and the decision to make it two movies and all this sort of stuff, the little bit of information that I have, to be clear,
Mm-hmm.
it really feels like there has just been stuff just kind of pushed into this movie to justify cutting it into two films so that they could put this movie out twice. I also come back to a question that I asked, I think, last week. If it had been one movie, would people be talking about it as merrily as they are? Because as you've pointed out already this episode, the second half of Wicked is pretty infamously known as the weaker half of the show. And so did they purposely put out the quote unquote good half to build up a bunch of goodwill, and now a bunch of people are going to feel the need to go to this movie next year? People are going to feel the need to eventually watch Wicked, right? People that didn't watch it this year but somehow are going to get dragged into these conversations over the next year, are going to find themselves saying, well, I guess I'm going to have to rent Wicked and then go see it, or God forbid they put it out in theaters again next year, so then you're paying to see this movie again plus paying to see part two, right? Which I'm sure is going to happen, right?
I mean, I have officially started telling people don't see Wicked if you don't have to. And I know that's like a crazy thing, because like if you have like family obligations or that, but if you're interested in it, I am begging people, wait until the second part is out. I cannot believe how just freaking empty only seeing half of this show made me feel. Like, and it's just so strange. And now I'm looking at it. You know what I was reminded this week? Is that Wicked did not win Best Musical at the Tonys despite being nominated.
No.
Avenue Q did. Right?
Yeah.
And let's tell you, the reason why Avenue Q won Best Musical is because it doesn't have a shitty second act. That's not my words. That is the words of everybody who talks about Wicked.
It celebrates its shitty second act. For those who don't know much about Avenue Q, and I'm just going to spoil this.
Yeah, go for it. It's a spoiler episode. Yeah.
But the point of Avenue Q is it's Sesame Street meets the real world, and in real world fashion, things don't go well for people just because they've met friends and can sing and dance. So there's a lot that happens in the later half of Avenue Q that is the real world getting in the way of shit. People not succeeding at their various goals throughout the play, but it celebrates that, right? It has been kind of the point since moment one. It tells you, hey, life kicks you in the fucking balls, and now we're going to show you for the next 3 hours how life can kick you in the balls, and we're going to teach you all about how life kicks you in the balls with letters and numbers and colors, friends. Like, that's the whole kind of point of Avenue Q. So in a weird way, it does kind of have that downer second act that it seems a lot of Broadway seems to delve into, because we talked about the same thing with Into the Woods, right? But like it has that, but in the structure of the show, it is much easier to celebrate and have fun with, right? Versus Wicked, there's this huge celebration and love of the source material and of these new versions of these characters and these new ideas about where the stuff could go, and then Defying Gravity happens. And I'll be honest, the real reason why I think the second half of Wicked doesn't work for people is that if you told me right now this was the end of Wicked, Defying Gravity, she flies off and she becomes the Wicked Witch, and Glinda gets stuck with these people and she ends up becoming a shill for them because that's the kind of person that she is, I would 100% buy that there is no more story left to this story.
Yeah.
The fact that there is intriguing to me, but it feels almost unnecessary.
So I know that I've like alluded to it before in the other one, but here is the big thing. And what Sejohn says is correct. Because this could be just taken as, this is the origin of the Wicked Witch of the West, and then you know what happens because you've seen The Wizard of Oz, right? You're familiar with the movie from 1939 where there's a Wicked Witch from the West who's terrorizing people. And so this, as part one, you could kind of go see part two of Wicked right now if you watch the 1939 original film. And the reason I say that is because the second act of Wicked is kind of just The Wizard of Oz.
But from, like, other people's perspectives, right? Like,
right.
We learn a little bit about what was going on around Dorothy, like, rather than follow just Dorothy, right? Yeah, and there are different characters that we have met in this first half that we are going to see become these characters we love in the second half and all that stuff. But it is so obvious and kind of on the nose that, like, in the first half, that, like, I'm okay with the fact that we might, that if I never saw it, I get it. I get that this guy becomes the Scarecrow. I get that this character becomes the Tin Man. I get that lion, the lion cub that we meet, that is scared of everybody.
That is cowardly,
right? right, yeah, right. Like there's all this stuff that, like, it is so kind of on the nose that if I never got any more, that's okay because I got enough already. I've been told who these characters are. I get it. I don't need any more, right? I'm intrigued to see what the second half does. And again, as somebody that then remembered that I have seen this show and just was honestly, I think, making out with a certain person during it. There's elements of my memory of this show already that so I'm kind of hanging my hat on that too, is that, like, I don't necessarily need the second half because I've seen the second half, that kind of thing. And, like, I think the second half of Wicked is just kind of by design a weaker story than the first half, and I don't know if it's going to pay off. I still don't know, even after seeing the first half and liking it, if it's going to pay off for people in the ways that they are really hoping it's going to.
It's going to pay off for me. I love the second act of
Just
Wicked.
To clarify,
it is universal. It is universal.
Okay,
yeah. It just feels like a WB move. I will be completely honest with you. I get why you keep making that little.
Well, part of it is
slip.
that I also can't believe Universal is still around and hasn't been swallowed up by WB or Disney yet. But
they have Wicked, Siege, and of course they're still around. But it is what it comes down to is I'm trying to find the transcript of it, but there's a strong bad email where they're like, "What is the origin of the stick?" And he's like, why does everything have to have an origin now? Why do we need to do it? That is sort of the problem, is that we're telling the origins of the Wicked Witch of the West, right? And all the other characters, and the Good Witch of the North, and all this. And so all of the new stuff that it introduces is the first act of Wicked, is the first film of Wicked, is Wicked Part 1. And then Part 2 is where all the stuff gets stitched together into The Wizard of Oz. And that is, by design, a lot less fun. Because it is Gregory, I can't think of his last name. It's his way that his characters... Sorry?
Gregory Maguire?
Maguire, yeah. It becomes Gregory Maguire's canon as to how the Cowardly Lion became the Cowardly Lion. And so, like, it's weirdly stitched onto something else. And it's kind of like the pigeon rat from The Simpsons. It's not pleasant to look at. And, like, it weirdly becomes canon if everything that we saw before we enjoyed so much that we want to believe that's what happened. This, unfortunately, has to happen for the rest of it. And I know that for a fact because here's the big spoiler. I'm going to share the big spoiler. They start a rumor. I'm a little surprised that it wasn't like peppered into part 1 of Wicked. Which also leads me to believe that like if they weren't going to be allowed to do part 2, they would have been okay with it. They pepper into excuse me. They pepper into the story this rumor that Elphaba will die if she's exposed to water. That is a persistent rumor that happens. And then it comes out in Act 2 that they started that rumor, Elphaba and another character. I'll keep that part secret for people. So, like, even though I'm melting, what a world. That was all a lie. And they basically used stage magic tricks to make it look like she was killed by water so that her and her lover could abscond and have a life together. And that does not happen in the book. In the book, she dies. But to quote the producers, another musical, Oedipus won't bomb if he winds up with mom. Keep it happy, keep it snappy, keep it gay. People want happy endings in musicals. Name a musical that actually ends on a down note. I cannot think of one. Like even Avenue Q, this musical that is about you're going to get kicked in the fucking teeth because that's the real world, ends with everything kind of working out for everybody.
Well, or the realization that they do have a community that they belong in. So despite the fact that they may not have these particular hopes and dreams that they're achieving, they do have a place in the world, right? It'd be fucking buck wild if it ended in like a mass suicide, right? Right? Like it's that idea that like, and that is what Avenue Q celebrates, this idea that like no matter how bad things get, you need to remember that there is community. And that was something that I think makes that show resonate with people because it is kind of at the heart of also Sesame Street, right? Is that no matter what, no matter where you end up in the world, no matter how bad things get, you will always have a place here is something that is celebrated, right? And so like, yeah, to your point, like a very, very kind of happier motif for an otherwise pretty downer show. You know, like, I mean, even Sweeney Todd ends up with the ingenues running off together, right? Like the kids get away at the end of that.
Yeah.
And like there's all sorts of wild stuff. I mean, Into the Woods has some downer endings depending on which story you follow, but that's sure not how that show wants you to remember it, right?
Right. It's just a wild thing. Also wild to bring up the Avenue Q and you'll always have a place to go. As David Zaslav announces, we're not doing any more Sesame Street. Like, we may not have a Sesame Street anymore, Sejohn, just to like talk about downer endings in our own real lives.
Is he trying to
he's
run
like
a race against Elon Musk to be the worst billionaire in the world? Like, what is the plan?
He's basically a real world Snidely Whiplash at this point. Like, how do you get rid of Sesame Street? And also, there are a bunch of parents that I know who only have HBO Max or Max because of Sesame Street. Like, everything else that they get to watch on it is a bonus because we have Max for the kids. And it's like, oh, well, that's awesome, right? Like, that is, as much as I don't want to be like, yay, corporate America, you're getting adults to watch adult content that you're offering by, like, sneaking it into the house via Sesame Street. Like, it's just a bad business decision on every level.
Well, I mean, also just a huge gut punch for the community that was behind Sesame Street, because when HBO first got it, there was a lot of fear that they were going to put it behind paywalls and stuff, and people were like, that's going to kill the whole point. And HBO at the time was very open about the fact that they felt that it was not about money. It was about the idea that Sesame Street was too important to let a lack of government funding. For anybody that doesn't remember, this all happened because a bunch of government funding was pulled from public broadcasting, right? And so Sesame Street was one of those big time shows that was like, I don't know, they can't afford to make Sesame Street anymore without this kind of backing. And so HBO stepped in and bought up everything having to do with Sesame Street, and people were like, oh great, now it's going to be what little we do have left is now going to be behind a paywall. And HBO made it very clear at the time that that was not the way that they viewed the acquisition of Sesame Street. They viewed it as a community service, essentially, to try and keep that thing going because it was so important to the world. And I do mean the world. And so, like, for Zaslav to turn around, he has, I mean, like, it really does put him, in my mind, at the moment, like a step above guys like Musk, who, like, I'm also not feeling too great about right now in the ways in which they have their fingers in every goddamn pie in this world. Like, it's a wild, that's an upsetting thing. And again, probably not the time for us to be talking about it.
No, but it's just
down another rabbit hole.
But if we're also going to talk about like what Avenue Q like echoed about Sesame Street, that's where we're at with that. And also, as I've just looked it up, so I want to make sure that I give all the information possible. It's just that they're not producing new episodes. They're still going to hold the license to broadcast old episodes. So, like, weirdly, because of that licensing, I don't think anybody would be able to touch Sesame Street until after 2027 when their licenses expire. And then if they choose to renew it on the reruns, I don't know what that would mean for new stuff. Like, they're weirdly tied together. So if someone were to pick up, right, and my logical choice would probably be Apple, since they have, like, the Fraggles and stuff, though I guess Disney as well, because they have the Muppets. Like, it could fit very nicely into either one of those markets. But Apple weirdly has this structure to be able to offer things for free. We've seen it with the Charlie Brown specials that they license the rest of the year, right? Like, we're like,
that's another instance though of community like pushback after because remember the first year that they bought that Charlie Brown stuff, it wasn't free the first year that they had it, and it was like really upsetting to a lot of people that the only place that they could get Charlie Brown Christmas specials were through Apple, and that they'd have to pay Apple. People that were like, I've never opened an Apple account, I'm not starting one now, but I want my Charlie Brown, like those kinds of things. And so they have smartly, I think, and like with a piece of media that isn't going to be bringing in billions of dollars, they've been like, fuck it, we'll give this one away for free and we look like the good guys. And that is the game that Apple has always played. I think we've talked about that before, is they are always so good at getting too close to the line of being evil, but then they take that one step back and everybody kind of forgets about Apple for a while, and so they get to kind of keep doing their bullshit up and every now and then they cross that line and people talk about it for a second, and then they automatically do something to recover from that, and so then people stop talking about them. They're very good at the recovery from the bad PR move. So I think I just want to remind everybody that the reason that Charlie Brown specifically with them is free for everybody now these holiday seasons is specifically because there was some major pushback when they first acquired Charlie Brown.
Right. But wouldn't you rather it go into their hands, who at least have shown will do something for free? Like, even if, like, a new episode of Sesame Street is available just the week that it airs.
Yeah. No,
like,
100%. 100%. But to assume that they aren't going to pull some bullshit with it, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to assume that there won't be some bullshit.
Every company is evil, Sejohn. I think we've learned that in the last couple of weeks. Not to get too political or talk about a certain somebody that everybody is doing their dream fan casts of right now. But it is like, but if Disney were to be the people who are like, we'll step up and take Sesame Street, ho, like, it would be terrible. Like, that would be worse.
People would be pissed. And rightly so.
And rightly so.
I'm not going to sit here and try and act like, no, the Disney model, especially with the ways in which Disney Plus has panned out and what we all hoped what Disney Plus was going to do, opening more access to Disney to more people, which is clearly not what happened with it at all, right? There were all these conversations before Disney Plus got started about, this is where they can put the vault stuff now. This is where we're going to get to see all those old shows and old movies that they don't talk about anymore. We'll be able to watch old cartoons that they kind of have been keeping away from people because they're a little bit more risque, but like they'll be there because this is your one-stop shop for Disney. And then Disney went in and was just like, no, we're never going to have our full library up. We're going to edit whatever the fuck we want. We're going to do whatever the hell we want with certain seasons of shows. Some things will be here, some things will be Hulu, some things will be both, some things will be FX. Like you're never going to be able to figure this fucking roadmap out. Disney, if Disney were to be the ones to step in, at least at this moment today, at the end of 2024, if Disney were the ones to step in and buy Sesame Street, there'd be a riot. People would be pissed.
Yeah. But even then, anybody that steps in to do it, right? And let's not talk like Peacock or Amazon or Netflix could also say, we're going to do the Sesame Street. Now, there'd have to be some money given to Warner Brothers because of how it's structured currently. Like, it is cartoonishly evil to be, I'm the guy who destroyed Sesame Street. But at the same time, like, it is an institution that has lasted for 55 seasons, right? They are on their 55th season of Sesame Street. If it were just to, if someone wanted to keep it going, and honestly, it should be kept going, right? It is an important thing in this world. Even if I don't love Elmo's dad, I'm gonna be honest with that. But I don't love Elmo's dad because when I met Elmo's dad, he was a completely different character, right? Like, the fact that they've changed Elmo's father to be who he is now, like, as someone who grew up with a certain institution of Sesame Street, that hits me in a way. But, like, it shouldn't die. It's something that, like, it should be a constant. And the fact that it was public broadcasting made it feel like it always was going to be. Like, it is really disappointing.
Yeah, well, because I think some people have forgotten, in the grand scheme of things, that there are some things that government should be investing in that don't turn a profit. And that's a whole fucking kettle of fish right now, right? As we stare down the barrel of things like the post office being closed because it doesn't make a profit. And then, of course, reactions to that of people being like, well, then why are we letting the military not make a profit? And there's all these conversations about, like, whether or not things should be profitable if they are government run. And we all seem to have forgotten that, like, part of the reason you make something government run is so that it doesn't have to be part of that fucking conversation anymore. That's literally the reason why the government steps in to pick something up, is because, yeah, this might not be making enough money for the for capitalism to take care of it, for Wall Street to give a shit about it, but this is important enough that we feel that it's okay that the government's going to have to glue something on this. And, like, that is, like, the entire fucking concept behind government funding.
Yeah.
And people have lost their fucking minds about that. The idea that the government might spend more on a thing than it might make back on that particular thing is just intolerable to a certain demographic.
I mean, that's why taxes and government funding exist, for the programs that by design are not profitable programs, but are necessary for a society to function.
No, Dev, no. Everything needs to be able to make money back and make us richer. Don't you know that? Every single thing that we do can only be in pursuit of making more money back.
I mean, I know that you're right, and that's how some people talk. It doesn't make me happy. I'm just gonna be honest about that. Like,
well, and so to bring it all back to the Wicked conversation, I don't know if there's much more left in the conversation for today.
We said a lot of it.
But that idea that in the effort, it is so obvious that there were so many choices made about this particular movie and its follow-up. Like, I'm not going to levy this at the entirety of Wicked as a franchise, because there's tons of other stuff around Wicked beyond these movies, beyond these particular people involved. But looking at just the film verse right now, it is so hard to not look at it and see decisions that were clearly being made purely for the profit decision. And that's fine. That's how this whole shit thing works. But to then see the ways in which people will rip movies to shreds, like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, right? Like Black Adam, to look at these movies and rip them to fucking shreds because they feel like they're pandery, to feel like they're just there just to get to make a buck. They bitch and moan about how, oh, this is just setting up more stuff for the future for me to spend money on rather than giving me a full experience now. All of this shit that I have been hearing people talk about, things that I enjoyed, it does, to be frank, hurt a bit to see this thing succeed doing exactly the same thing and nobody having those conversations. It is wild to me. And so it does rub me the wrong way at certain moments and in certain conversations and in certain contexts when people want to talk about the success that this movie is seeing, yet they don't want to use that same metric for success on a different film or a different franchise. It is just it is the inconsistency that is making it harder and harder and harder for me to be the movie fan. I put quotes around that because I don't know if I am one anymore. But to be the movie fan that I definitely used to be, I don't think I can be anymore, because I can't talk to people the same way about movies like I used to. I can't just go to a movie and enjoy myself. And if I do, I feel this weird kind of like need to justify why I'm enjoying myself. Hell, half the reason that I do this show with you, the bigger half is because I enjoy doing this show with you. But like a large part of why I do this show with you is to kind of parse this shit out with you. you are one of those kinds of people that I can have these kinds of safe conversations with and figure out why this thing worked or didn't work for me. But the truth of the matter is, you don't have to be having these conversations. You can just enjoy a fucking thing and not have to justify it to anybody. The world as it is now, and the ways in which fandom works, and the ways in which enjoyment and entertainment intertwine, like, you feel this weird need to be able to stand up for this shit and say, I liked it because of this, and I enjoyed it because of that, and that makes it good. Not necessarily, right? I think all of this is a very good lead into another thing for us to talk about.
Well, just one sec, though, as you're bearing your chest about the importance of this show to you. Yes, the bulk of this is definitely, I love doing this show. I love having something to look forward to. But I was out in the world a lot this past week, like going to see movies, seeing people out for drinks at bars. And I noticed this thing about people that, like, all they really talk about is entertainment. They have these surface level discussions about entertainment. And, like, I get that at work, right? Because you're with those people like 40 hours a week. Eventually you're going to slip into it. But, like, 3 hours at a bar together, and, like, all you can talk about is Yellowstone and, like, the new Tyler Sheridan show. And I overheard this stuff, and I realized, and I wanted to thank you, Sejohn, for allowing me to do this show with you, because it allows me to go out into the world and be a fully functioning human being who doesn't just need to communicate in the latest shows that I've watched or things that I've experienced. Because once a week,
the way that we talk, the way that we talk here is not necessarily the way that we talk outside of this show.
It's outside of the show, because I have this like 1.5 to 2 hours block every week where I'm getting it all out of my system and into this podcast. And, like, I was kind of sad, like, people, like, talking about Yellowstone out in the world, and I'm just like, when's the last time you saw each other? Like, shouldn't you be talking about your lives and not just, like, the lives you watched on your television? So I did want to bring that up as part of this episode. So if you're going to talk about how you get to parse out these conversations about entertainment in this safe space that is the Say Report, not to really, like, use that term the way it's used in it, but, like, I'm never going to get mad at you for being like, Ant-Man and the Wasp only made $1,000 less than Wicked right now. And that, I love that, because that's crazy, right? Because everybody hates Quantumania. Like, it is the way that everybody compared Joker Fale Adieu to the Marvels for its final movie to only be $3,000 more than what the Marvels made is, like, just also crazy. Because I think people enjoyed the Marvels a whole heck of a lot more than, like, Joker Fale Adieu. I think that's just a fact. Like,
I think anybody I know that went to go see the Marvels enjoyed their time with the Marvels. I know, you being one of the people that talked about this, people that walked away from Fale Adieu having some misgivings. You still enjoyed yourself, but at the end of the day, there were definitely things that you talked about that you were like, I just don't know if I loved this part of it. From all that I know, people that didn't want to see the Marvels didn't, and that's why that movie failed, because not enough people wanted to go see that movie. But the people that did want to go see that movie did go see that movie and did enjoy themselves with it. So, like, I don't know.
With the Joker, people saw it and were very upset. Even that, like, even somewhere, like, I really enjoyed it. I think the singing may have been a misstep, and then at the end, I was like, well, that's how you're going to end this? And it's like, but they still enjoyed their time with it. Like, I was happy to read that someone enjoyed it, despite questioning the musical stuff and questioning the end of the movie. Because at the end of the day, shouldn't we look for the silver lining on the things that we spend our time with? And without any further ado, Sejohn, let us welcome the audience into a new world of gods and monsters. Come, Dimitri, we go hunt. It gets our mind off your killed mother.
Who I am not entirely sure actually killed herself, right? Like, that's what we're supposed to believe by the end of that movie? I don't know. It's
the fact that it was a suicide, she took her own life. There's no celebration for it. Like, it does not feel like she took her own life. The movie raised a lot of good questions. We're talking about Kraven the Hunter, so that people know that we're about to spoil Kraven the Hunter. It's been out in theaters for, I guess, 3 days as of this typing, because somebody at the Say Report went to go see it on Thursday night and gave me so jealous of him. But I
will not. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't know I was going to go see it Thursday night. I just happened to. I am in a position this weekend where I am kind of doing a little bit of a bachelor's weekend for myself, and found myself unexpectedly free within 20 minutes of a viewing of that movie. And I was like, well, fuck, I've got nothing to do. It's 20 minutes away. Devin, I know you. I already knew you had plans to see it. I was like, what else would I do right now? Like, I have to go see this movie. I will also admit, part of that math was I was here when the Sony Spider-Verse tried to start off. Like when Spider-Man Sans MCU was out there. Like, and by all accounts, at the moment when I was thinking about this on Thursday, Craven was going to be kind of the end for a while of any kind of Marvel stuff outside of the MCU, because it wasn't doing well already. Like, even before I went to go see it in a preview showing, it was already getting kind of bombed in the reviews. And I'm not saying review bombed. I'm saying it was bombing in reviews, and wasn't, and people were already talking about how it wasn't doing anything in pre-sales. I thought I was going to kind of bookend my experience of outside the MCU Marvel movies when I went to go see it. Now, some stuff has come out since that is some really interesting comments that people have made, but there's still a good chance I was right.
Okay. So here's the one thing I just need to confirm, right? So we're talking about the Sony Spider-Man universe. Of the 6 films in the Sony Spider-Man universe, so 3 Venoms, Morbius, Madam Web, Kraven the Hunter, is this the only one you saw in theaters?
Yeah, I believe it is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like, for me, I've been so excited to get to talk about this movie.
But I mean, like, Sony and Spider-Man have had a
right.
relationship even before this, though.
Yes. I mean, because I've been, like, thinking about things, but of the Sony Spider-Man universe, which is what they dubbed this experiment, that we're going to talk about the Variety article, right, Sejohn? I feel like we have to talk about the Variety article and just how friggin' insane that revelation is.
Yes. Yeah. We're going to talk about all of it, I think. I think
okay,
we're going to
good.
spend the rest of this episode talking about Kraven the Hunters when I think it's about to happen.
Okay. Then, haha. Okay. So, the fact that these movies have happened, and I have been kind of excited for every single one of them. Like, there has been, like, a legitimate in my body, like, I have to go see this movie in theaters. Madam Web, I got shirts made. Like, that's how excited I was for Madam Web. So the fact that, like, of the 6 films that comprise the Sony Spider-Man universe, this is the first one we get to talk about, like, right after I saw it, that has really kept me going. The other thing that kept me going is that up until Wednesday, there were no laser projection showings of Kraven the Hunter happening in my area. And that bummed me out. But on Wednesday morning, they went up for 10 p.m. at night. So I'm like, I'll go to a 10 p.m. show. Let's see if Friday works. CJ, do you want to take a guess at how many people were in the theater with me on Friday night when I saw Kraven the Hunter? I will tell you
on
this.
Friday night,
it is more than one. It was not just me. So...
Well, no, I was going to say I would venture to say a dozen. I saw it in a laser projection theater out here as well, but what I learned is that we have a 60-seat laser projection theater.
Oh, that sounds kind of fun. I'm not going to lie.
It is wild. Basically, every seat is like one of those front row seats where you feel like you're looking up actors' noses the whole time, but I did go and see it in that theater. And even in a theater that size, I would say there was probably about 12 other people with me, and that was on a Thursday afternoon, like, viewing for a preview showing. So you going on a Friday night premiere night showing in a bigger box, I would say probably a dozen people or so.
There was Devon Decker and 2 couples for a total of 5 viewers of a 10 p.m. showing of Kraven the Hunter.
I guess 10 p.m. Man, 10 p.m. on a Friday night. That sucks.
The theater was busy as fuck. I pulled up there and I'm like, oh shit, there's a lot of cars here. But I'd been monitoring the whole time to, like, see if it was going to be busy. And when I left my house, there were only my seat and two sets of 2 that were sold. And those were the only people who saw the movie. There were people there for the Lord of the Rings Rohirrim movie. I don't know how to say that word at all.
Yeah, but the War of Rohirrim,
like
right?
groups of grown-ass men, all with their popcorn hammer popcorn buckets, like they're marching into it. It was not a slow night at the theater, but they, in the laser projection, has to be at least 200 seat theater, probably more. There 5 tickets were sold. It is just like, I'm glad that they did this for us, but this was a loss for them, because there's no other way to spin the fact that was a loss for them. No, and I was surprised, and like that was the most surprising thing. I don't love going to movies at nighttime. I prefer an earlier morning, but I wanted to see it in laser projection. I wasn't not going to see. The only Sony Spider-Man movie I didn't see in theaters was Let There Be Carnage, and honestly, I don't know if Let There Be Carnage ever really went to theaters, or if it did, like it was brief.
Yeah, no, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it was one of those ones around here where it did like a day-and-day release, and it was only in theaters for like a weekend or two.
Yeah, so that's the only one I didn't see, but I certainly was happy to see Last Dance this year. I was stupid excited for Madam Web because I liked the character. And then The Craven, oh my God, all of the trailers and stuff, I don't know how people were like, this looks awful, because it didn't look like a superhero movie. It just looked like a movie. It kind of reminded me of The Joker, right? To be like a total dick about it, it reminded me of how people talk about the Joker, where like, yeah, it's a comic book character, but it's like a real movie.
Well, so to kind of give a better impression of what I thought when it was the first time I had seen a comic book movie, because that's the genre.
Yep.
We can't avoid it, and this movie does fall into some classic Sony comic book movie tropes, so we'll definitely talk about that. But tropes and traps. But the preview was watching something more like watching like a Jason Statham like action movie, right? Like when I saw the first preview for The Beekeeper, like that's what this felt like to me. Is I was like, oh, we're just like down and dirty, just doing just like an R-rated, hardcore, overly violent action film. And the last time I saw a Marvel movie that was willing to do that was fucking Punisher Warzone. So like I was on fucking board. I would even say the Thomas Jane Punisher, right? Like when they
both
there,
the Punisher is what this felt like. This felt like a Punisher movie in a lot of ways.
and initially like that was kind of the feel I got, and I was like, and I enjoy the hell out of those movies. Let's go do this, right? Like yeah, I'm on board for that, because we've always talked about how with the MCU, one of my favorite things, and one of the things that I think made the really more successful MCU films actually successful, is that they were genre films first before they were comic book films. They also brought the comic booky stuff in because they wanted to tie everything together, but there are distinctive genres that certain films fall into. Ant-Man being a heist film,
Winter Soldier being a spy thriller,
a spy thriller, whereas like the first Captain America was a 1940s propaganda style film, more like The Rocketeer, right? Like that kind of thing. And so like seeing that they were leaning into a genre, not just, hey, look at these cool characters that we own the rights to, but look at what kind of cool movie aesthetic we're going to apply to this character. I was immediately just like sold. I was like, hell yeah. And so the ways that people kind of reacted to like uninterested or bored, and I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? If you removed the Marvel aspect, would you feel that same way? Or is it just because it is a Marvel project, Sony Marvel project, to be fair, but because it is a Marvel project that you're interested in, that you're instantly turning your brain off? Because otherwise, this looks like a pretty better than average action film from what I can tell.
And I'm happy to. I think it is a better than average action film. Just to like, not only does it feel that way, I think the end product was very, very good. But I think that's why the term superhero fatigue and the way it gets thrown around, people are just instantly uninterested when you mention that it's a Marvel property or a DC property. Honestly, I think like small level stuff. I mean, I guess Hellboy, everybody kind of knows it's a comic book, and we saw what that did to Hellboy the Crooked Man this year. So yeah. I
will argue that I don't know how much of that would be superhero fatigue versus a lot of people that have very strong opinions about Guillermo del Toro's version being their definitive version and kind of just don't care.
And don't
about
want to
other
go any further
versions.
than that.
That's more of a that's more of a Guillermo. That's more of a we kind of blew our load on the one of the greatest movie creators of our time on the first couple of movies here, and we're never going to match that.
I don't know. I mean, you can go listen to us talk about Crooked Man. I liked what it did in terms of adaptation. But we're talking about Kraven. And here's the thing that I forgot is that in a Kraven the Hunter movie, there's going to be other superhero or Marvel comic book characters. I cannot tell you the excitement that went through my body like a bolt of lightning when Calypso was introduced. Because I'm like, oh, fuck, I forgot. Like, Calypso is his wife. Like, is that what they're going to go? Is that where this is going? I forgot that in a Kraven the Hunter movie, you'd probably have Calypso.
So this is where some of my ignorance about the character started to kind of come into play, because there were moments where characters would show up and I was like, oh, cool, I totally get why you're tying this to Kraven. Then there'd be other moments where characters would show up and I was like, is this quote unquote canon? Is this them just kind of playing with this just to make sure that they can lay these characters in? Then certain characters are the characters that are introduced and I'm asking those questions and then they kind of don't go anywhere. Like by the end of the movie, there's we already talked about how there's going to be spoilers in this movie, right? But the introduction of the concept that the chameleon is in this film, and then the use of him kind of not really doing anything fun with the fact that he is the chameleon, and then like was such a disappointment for me. And like knowing kind of how this film, when it was supposed to come out, what it was supposed to mean in the grand scheme of things, what it was supposed to do for like the Sony side of the franchise versus also tying some stuff to the MCU. Like I kind of get why Chameleon was introduced, but then the instant that they knew that this movie was not going to be that, which they've now known for 2 years this movie has been put off, right? Why did they not go in and maybe trim the fat on some of this stuff that then they knew was going to go nowhere? Because all it does is make me as a moviegoer go, well, that means nothing, because I know that they're not going to continue on this. So like, there's stuff that happens in this movie that is doing that classic thing that people really hate about comic book movies. This is one of those tropes and traps we were talking about, where it's doing a lot of setup for a world that we are going to get to delve into in later films, but inevitably we aren't going to get to see those later films, right? And it's one of those things that people talk about when they talk about having superhero fatigue, is they're sick and tired of going to movies that are just previews for other movies.
Yeah. So everything that they did with Dimitri, like, I'm like, all right, that's a great nod to the fact that Kraven's half-brother is the chameleon. That is a well-established fact in the comics. I remember when the animated series made the reveal in like when the Sinister Six go to Russia and they unlock the death ray or the doomsday weapon that creates Electro. Like that's a whole part of that story, is the reveal that like Chameleon and Kraven as members of that Sinister Six have their own nefarious goals because they're half brothers. So that is something that I have known. So like when he would imitate his father and he's like, well, you're getting really good at that. And then his father, my boy is a chameleon. He can sound like anyone. I'm like, these are all fun little references to the fact that in the comics, Kraven's brother is the fucking chameleon. So it was fun for me with that knowledge. What I did not expect was that the second to last shot of this film would be the reveal that he sought out Miles Warren after being kidnapped and the whole events of the film happened in order to help him with like the missing finger, right? Because he had his finger cut off, but then he had all 5 fingers on each hand when he was playing the piano again. And Miles Warren... Yeah,
I was trying to see if he did, because he's not playing the piano in that last moment. Noticeably, he is standing at a microphone, and there's all of this stuff. He's not sitting at a piano. So I was like, oh, does he still not have his finger? And then they reveal all this stuff about what he's done, and I was like, okay, so is his finger back? But then
they showed his hand. They did show at some moment where you could see that he did have all of his digits again. And I'm like, interesting. Beyond that,
though,
yeah,
why the choice to do that, totally get that. The choice to introduce him as the chameleon, fine. It doesn't add anything to this movie that he is the chameleon. It's not like at some moment he uses his abilities to change the plot in any way or move the plot forward in any way.
Which was disappointing.
He can do.
I was expecting it to happen, and it was sad that it didn't. Like,
and the other choice is that in that final scene, the reveal of all of that is fine, but it's also turned him into a fucking asshole for no reason. And I get that that could be probably part of the whole idea that with like going through those experiments with Warren cracks, break something in you. That would explain what we see with the Rhino earlier in the movie as well, right? So that idea that like, there needs to already be a little something in you that's already kind of a little broken, a little chipped away, but what this shit does is like rip you in two. But we're not given enough of that part of the story to see that. So all we're given is after everything that happens in this movie, in the last 2 minutes of this film, his brother, who honestly is one of the most likable people in the entire fucking movie, becomes just a fucking dick and then walks off and credits roll. And it's just like, what the fuck just happened?
Walks off, credits don't roll until fucking Sergey gets the Kraven the Hunter vest. And it looked so goofy. But then when he sat down in that fucking throne doing the exact cover pose from, it might be Death in the Family. It was one of those. It's the exact comic book cover pose where he's sitting in the throne. His legs are all wide. And I'm just like, that is fucking striking. That was such a beautiful visual to end the movie on. And it was such a beautiful thing to end the film on. I'm like, I kind of hope there's no mid-credit or end-credit scenes. Because, like, what you just left me with really was a cherry on top of this incredibly fun time at the theater, right? And the fact that his brother eventually does become the chameleon, what I didn't need was the reveal that, like, he has the chameleon's shape-shifting abilities. Like, they didn't make any sense. Like, when he, cocked his head and he was the white no-nose face of the chameleon, I'm like, I guess that's cool, but, like, I didn't need it here, right?
I kind of like that he turned into Kraven, right? Because
that moment was excellent. That was super cool.
Because it shows you kind of the stakes of what was now going on. But again, like it basically became the start of a whole other fucking movie in the last 2 minutes, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on here? And then the movie ends. So like I'm not finally on board. There was some stuff that happened earlier in the movie that I was on board for, and that wrapped up. So I was like, okay, that now I'm getting ready for this movie to end. And then another movie starts, and I'm just like, oh shit! And then that movie ends instantly, and it's just like, well, what the fuck was the point of this? And again, it's because it's that idea that this feels like this scene specifically is a perfect example of that thing that people hate in these kinds of movies, where it is setting up something that we are now never going to get an answer to.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing is, if we want to look at the entire Sony Spider-Man universe, what a big question is, right? Especially in a world where, like, Spider-Man's not there. We'll get there. Don't worry. We have to talk about the fact that Spider-Man's not there. A lot of questions about power and responsibility do come up, right? We met the Rhino on that hunt where Kraven, like, was given the serum that turns him into Kraven the Hunter, right? Still by Calypso, by happenstance, though, as opposed to how it happened in the comics, like a fun semi-modernization of that whole thing. And honestly, I question if he got his powers not only because of the serum, but because the lion's blood dripped into his open wound, right?
So again, back to me, who doesn't know fuck all from the comics. The potion completely made no sense, came out of nowhere, and what made more sense was all of the stuff about his blood mixing with that of this, from all accounts that I could tell, mystical lion, right? Yeah. So I kept waiting the entire movie for them to lean into what the fuck happened with that lion, and instead the movie really wanted to lean into this whole thing with the serum that, to me, was completely unnecessary. So, like, knowing that this is actually part of his stuff, then okay, I get where it came from. But this movie does not do anything with it other than to show you it exists, and that's it. It doesn't get into any conversation about what it could possibly be, what it could do, what it does do. Instead, it mixes it with this other origin that you're pointing out that is, to be honest, for somebody that this is my only handhold, the better story of the two is that this man that was raised to hunt finds that he is feeling something weird already within him where he doesn't really want to hunt because of the respect that he's feeling for these animals. And like they're showing clearly that even before he changes, there is something in him that he's connecting with these animals in some way. And he sees this lion that, again, by all accounts, is kind of this godlike figure in this part of the world. Like he ends up getting attacked because of something that his father does by this god figure. His blood mixes with this god lion, and now suddenly he has these hunting abilities. That is 100 times better of a story than, oh, also there's some mysterious, we're never going to talk about it serum that is also involved. If you completely removed the serum from this movie, it would have made a lot of scenes a lot better, and in fact would have gotten one of what I think is the worst scenes in this movie, which is after a 10-minute phenomenal opening, the movie goes fucking flatline for about 5 minutes because two characters you've never met before, and neither of the actors are acting particularly well, one of them being a quite older woman and one of them being quite a younger kid. So like, I don't want to act like they get a pass because they're in a certain demographics, but the quality of this film goes fucking dead in a scene for about 5 minutes from two actors that you then never see again, because one character never comes back and the other character is then played in an older version of herself, so it's a different actress who is a million times better. And so like, I'm just like, what the fuck is the point of this scene? Also, what the fuck is this? Now we're introducing like this like serum aspect to this. I didn't, it makes sense. Yeah. It's Spider-Man, sciencey shit. Okay, I keep waiting for the serum to become like to be explained, but it's just a fucking MacGuffin the whole time. There's some element about how he's been looking for Calypso because of the serum, but he doesn't really know about the serum. He knows about the card.
He knows that she saved his life.
Didn't need the serum. He didn't need, but like the serum then doesn't really serve a purpose because the card is really more of the connective tissue between them. And like finding out that like she's the one that found him from this god figure, I don't understand why she needed to be there with this particular MacGuffin. It just made no sense to me. And like, I'm glad to hear that it is something that comes from the comics, that's great and all, but like the movie does nothing to explain what the fuck this stuff is. So I can totally understand anybody coming to watch this movie, much like me, without any of that knowledge, being like, there's an entire plot line in this movie that starts from nowhere, goes nowhere, and honestly produces some of the worst scenes in this film.
You're not wrong, is the first thing that I'm going to say. It is them hewing in line too closely. It is, we want to create a modernized origin for Kraven the Hunter, but we also don't want to alienate people who know it. Because in it, Kraven was a hunter, right? And Calypso's character, she's a voodoo witch. She's a Haitian voodoo witch. That is Calypso from the comics. And they get together, they start dating, and she mixes up a potion for him, though they call it a serum, that will enhance your already honed abilities to mystical things. Kraven the Hunter in the comic books is more of a mystical character than a scientific character. But what they have been struggling with the character of Kraven the Hunter since, I'm gonna say the Neogenics nightmare stuff, that was the central driving force of the animated series of Spider-Man. Because you need to understand that in the comics at the time, they were doing the whole clone saga. There's Miles Warren again, which really wore its welcome out. So for a long time, I mean, there was a time where Marvel almost got sold to Sony for like $7 million, right? The $7 million deal that Sony just ended up not taking, that would have completely changed everything that we've experienced in our lifetimes related to Spider-Man and all of the other characters. But Sony instead said we don't want to.
I mean, Marvel, like the MCU in general, would have been a completely different thing if Sony had its hands in back then.
Right.
Yeah.
They could have bought the entire company, but instead, like, all we really want is Spider-Man. So if you want to sell a Spider-Man for a little bit less, we're willing to do that. Because honestly, if we buy your whole company, we're just going to dismantle it anyway and just keep Spider-Man. So they're like, fine, you can have Spider-Man for this. And that is why Sony in perpetuity owns Spider-Man, because of a deal that they made like back in the 90s. And so for everything to kind of build out of the series in the way that it did, the Neogenics nightmare of it all, the fact that, I mean, the Spider-Man at its core is an allegory for nuclear power, right? Nuclear power used properly can be successful. That's Spider-Man. But then almost every single one of his villains represents the dangers of nuclear power.
With great power comes great responsibility. That is
Right.
that is what that line is truly reflecting on. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So that,
And, you know, you say nuclear power, but I think over the years, I think it has evolved to the concepts of science in general.
Yes.
Right. Like the idea that science in the right hands can be used for good, you know, and that's where you start to get things with like Morbius. It's about medicine. With Craven, it's weirdly about hunting.
yeah.
It's weirdly about like our relationship to nature.
To nature and
right,
yeah.
Right.
So it all works, but I'm talking like when Steve Ditko and Stan Lee sat down and created the character, Stan Lee has always maintained that the philosophy of Spider-Man was trying to personify the dangers of nuclear power. Like,
yeah, I mean, they tied everything back to their experiences with World War II, right? And,
exactly.
and growing up in like the ripples of that. And so like, yeah. So the gamma radiation for the Hulk and nuclear science for Spider-Man and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's just an important thing to know. So then when you get to the Spider-Man characters who are not tied to science, it becomes a little strange once, because you're not wrong when you say that, like, it's since become an allegory for science, right? I mean, even talking something like the clone saga, right? Cloning was a big fucking issue in the late 80s and early 90s, up until we fucking cloned the sheep. Like, it was a thing that we...
I mean, and that just made it worse, right?
Right.
Once people found out that we were capable of it, it became a whole other
debate.
A whole other threat.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, people that, for anybody that was not around then or doesn't remember, like, think about the ways in which we have talked about AI and the way in which that has, and the way in which that has evolved over the last 10 years. Ultron, but we're not going to go there at the moment. But like, think about the ways in which the AI conversation has. That was the way that we used to talk about cloning back in the 80s and 90s. Cloning was this science that was going to come in and break the world. And in ways it has. We there's a lot that we now know about ways in which we can advance certain things and maybe only do things in pieces, parts when people maybe need like an organ, as opposed to completely creating whole humans whole cloth. But like the ways that people talk about AI now, very reminiscent of the ways that we were talking about cloning in the 90s.
Yeah. I had to, in like one of my history classes in high school, we had to debate about cloning. And I decided to focus on the emergent technology of the ability to clone not whole humans, but like we can clone a set of lungs and things like that. And they'd be fully functioning if they were in a body. And that, like, I won it. And then the person that I won the debate against filed a protest with my teacher because the debate was supposed to be on human cloning. And I'm like, it was on human cloning. I just distilled it down to the part that's not scary to people. Like, I looked at all the research, right? Which
was your job on that side of the debate, right?
Right.
It's like...
Yeah. No, if I focused on, we should clone humans, I would have lost. I had to find an argument that would get people on my side, which is what was happening in the world. I remember that one very clearly because I'm like, we can just clone organs. We have scientific tests that prove we could clone hearts and they would function if they were put into a human body. So, like, I don't know why, like, yes, human cloning, we could clone humans whole hog and harvest their organs, but the work that goes into that, when we can actually just do this thing, but you're not wrong. Like, that's where cloning was. And so Spider-Man suddenly becomes this whole allegory for the good and bad applications of scientific progress, right? Especially with the movie in 2001 and then the Ultimate comic book series that comes along in 2002, where specifically the spider that bit Peter was part of the Goblin program because Norman Osborn was trying to cure a disease that was like genetic in his family, right? We injected it into spiders so we could refine it, but also the venom would allow us to distill it down so we could create a serum to do it. But Kraven the Hunter was always a mystical character. Well, I mean, a lot of the time, he was just a hunter. He didn't have any powers. Yeah. And it wasn't until...
This is going to be... so this is going to be kind of a nod back to something we've already talked about, but some questions that I have at this point. My knowledge of Kraven as a character is limited to the idea that I knew that he was basically considered the greatest hunter in the world, possibly even universe, right? There's always Marvel stories where they want to do that, right? But this idea being that he just had innate abilities that allowed him the ability, the tracking and proficiency with weapons and fighting and things like that. So it made him a formidable opponent, but one of the lower level ones, because at the end of the day, I had never understood there was an ability set, right? Like I did not know that. This movie is the first time that I ever really kind of learned about the ability set. And so in that, seeing that his ability set came from a animal god in the movie, it does, specifically in this movie, seeing that he has this ability set that I'm not going to keep dancing around it like it's a maybe. This movie establishes that his blood mixes with that blood of that lion. They show it more than once, and that is part of the reason why he is who he is. Down to the fact that, like, when he stands in the shadows, his eyes glow just like that specific lion's eyes glowed.
Yeah.
Right. Like they tie him to that animal in this movie. It is not.
You're not making that up. They definitely tie him to that animal in this film.
So that made that just, in the sense of everything that you're talking about with what Spider-Man is. Yes, I could still see some of the mysticism to all of that because of the fact that it was this like god creature that they were even tracking in the first place, but it still made it Spider-Man-y enough because of the whole animal attack leads to powers. Like it echoes Peter's story. So is that just completely whole cloth for this movie?
Whole cloth for this movie. And
I mean, that's wild to me because that's the much better origin story.
It's the better origin story.
So far.
There's that moment where like the thick blood drips from the lion because it has wounds too, because it was shot by Kraven's father, which is what caused him to attack Kraven. Like that whole sequence was wonderful. Like the fact
and then it chooses to stop attacking him and brings him somewhere to be safe.
Brings him somewhere to be safe. Like it is.
It's like its own natural instincts kick in when it's shot and it attacks the thing in front of it, which happens to be Kraven,
Sergey.
What's his name? Sergey, right? Yeah, I mean he calls himself Kraven eventually, but like
Kravinoff is the last name. Kraven is specifically Sergey Kravinoff. They're not all Kravens.
So right, but it attacks Sergey right in like this moment of
fear, really.
Fear. I mean, because it's been shot, and then it grabs him and runs off with him. And rather than finish him off, it brings him to a person to save him, and that person saves him. So like there's this like really, it's so much more interesting than all of this stuff that they do. And this is where we get back to the movie, and this is on the movie for not doing this. If the serum is supposed to be the actual origin, and if the serum is supposed to be the thing that I'm guessing was going to eventually really kind of blow up in the grand scheme of things, because come on, that serum not coming back if they eventually tied things to Spider-Man and the Sinister Six and stuff, and like them trying to figure out what's in it, and Calypso kind of never really revealing what's in it, I could see the potential for all of that. But in the grand scheme of how this movie was made, it feels almost like that's not what the movie wanted to do. The movie really wanted to do this whole thing of tying him mystically to animals through this god lion's blood. Yeah. And it's like, pick a lane. The movie refuses to pick which story it wants to tell, and because of that, the serum story suffers greatly.
So
the animal story is phenomenal.
It's great. They speed run the serum stuff in this movie. That's the really crazy thing. Is like, so by all accounts, what you said is right. He's attacked by the god lion. It takes pity on him. Their blood mixes, and it's sort of what gives it. But the catalyst to that is the serum. The serum is the radioactivity of the spider that allows Peter's blood to become radioactive and gain the spider abilities. Okay. The way that they do it,
that I can get on board with, and that was not the way that it's
not like, said. And it's totally something that's meant to be inferred, right? But it is like, while the serum is healing his body because the lion blood is in there, it merges with his bloodstream, thus giving him these animal powers. What the serum is also supposed to do, and they talk about it, is that like it's supposed to give him like sight beyond sight and all of these other things. This is that weird speech that happens. And then, so Calypso eventually, after he tries to hunt Spider-Man and realizes It's not a fair fight, which is also a lovely thing about Kraven, the hunter, as a character. And they really distill it down in that moment where he's attacked by the God Lion, because he's like, no, I mean, a coward uses a gun. What it should be is man against beast, only using the tools that we were given at birth. And like, that's why when he sees the lion, he doesn't shoot it. Like, he feels this weird kinship and this, like, if we're going to fight the way that we're fighting. And then his dad's all mad at him, like, why didn't you shoot? And it's like, well, I didn't shoot because I don't want to, like, there's no sport in using a gun. Kraven the Hunter in this movie is also Batman post 1985, kind of, where, like, I don't use guns. Because he never uses a gun. He only ever uses, like, the weapons around him. And I guess he has that arsenal, but that arsenal is a lot of knives and one bow and arrow.
Right, and I think the idea being that, like, those are things that he hones, right?
Right.
Like, there's only so much he feels, there's only so much that you can do with a gun, but at the end of the day, the gun is always going to be this tool outside of yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, there's a lot of stuff about the ways in which people who hunt with knives and spears and bows and arrows that feel that they are doing something much more natural, you know, and there's arguments to be made about that, if you but that is where he clearly lands in it. But like, this is all also beautifully emulated in the moment when he catches a fish with his bare hands and eats it, right? Like, he stands on a rock and then, like, just reaches in and grabs one rather than setting up any type of trap or fishing pole.
And that's total Kraven. Like, that's a thing that Kraven in the comics could do, even before he was given the serum by Calypso. And his justification, and it is a justification, his code, right, which is, oh, why? Because you have a code, you're better than father, like, all of that. But his justification is that, like, a man hunts a lion, but a lion has claws. So to even that battlefield, man can use the claw of his own design, which is the knife, right? If he were going up against something that, like, could shoot bullets, like I guess, men. Like, what?
Like other men.
Like other men, right?
Up,
yeah. If he were hunting another man, I mean, ideally he would not use a gun, but if it came down to it, he'd be like, I will use this, because it evens the playing field.
He uses much more elaborate traps. Like, let's put it that way.
Yes.
Like, he does do that, because he does set some pretty, frankly, badass traps up for that whole moment.
Did you get to see a trailer for Novocaine before Kraven the Hunter?
No, not yet. I know it's out there. But
Red Band trailer beforehand. It was fantastic. And there's a scene, spoilers for the Novocaine trailer, where he walks into a house that's been booby trapped and he winds up getting, like, a spiked ball in his back. So then when I'm watching Kraven the Hunter and the guy who, like, hits the same sort of trip line and gets the big spiked log in his back, like, that was a cool sort of mirroring to a trailer I saw earlier. Like, it was one of those times where I'm like, way to go, marketing. Like, you nailed it.
You knew exactly what trailer to put with this, yeah.
Yeah, like, it was, like, exact mirroring, like, the way that it was shot before it happening. So that was really cool. But that's always been the justification of Kraven the Hunter, is that he wants to even the playing field, which is why he goes to his wife Calypso and he's like, I cannot catch the spider because he has abilities I do not. And then she puts together the serum that will enhance your own abilities. It won't make you Spider-Man, but it will give you the strength you need. It will allow you to match his. So like, that happens. But I just want to finish the serum talk. I don't want to talk about the serum anymore. And then it is years later that Calypso perfects the serum so that he no longer needs to take it and it just becomes a part of his body. So, like, that's the second time he takes the serum. The creators of this movie were like, we don't want to deal with this fucking serum anymore. They clearly wanted to just tell the story that you talked about, where this god lion mystically gives him these powers. Because they don't tell we never see her make the serum. We don't see how it's made. We don't know its properties. It is basically just a health potion. And then that first time he took the health potion, because of the foreign bodies, his body's incorporated them into his system. And then
it's a complete misdirect for most of the movie, because when he does finally meet her and ask her about it, she claims there isn't any left. So as far as we know, the only serum that is in this movie, and again, as somebody that doesn't know what's going on, as far as I know, was this little bit that she was given when she was a child, too young to understand what it was. She used it on him, and she doesn't know anything about it, and the only person that it is dead. So it's just like, oh, so this is just going to just be this thing that just exists in this movie then that we're never going to get an answer to. I didn't expect it to come back. When she pulls out a second vial of it at the end, I was like, oh, was there maybe some left in it earlier? I thought maybe I saw some, but maybe I didn't or something. And then he's like, I thought you had more of that. And I'm like, wait. There has been more syrup this whole time? That was a complete fucking turnaround for me. It was like a complete misdirect for most of this movie. I thought we were done with the serum story. I didn't realize it was going to come back a second time.
I don't know, but they like brought it back so that like for those super pedantic people, right? Which I know that sometimes I am that. I wouldn't have needed it. But when he's like, you need to leave because now they're aware of you and you have a target on your back. 5 men just entered the building and they don't look like they belong here. And then I made that beautiful joke of, why are they not wearing shoes? Because like he didn't wear shoes and he got in trouble for walking into the building without shoes. There was some good comedy in this movie too. I really liked Kraven. I'm not gonna lie. And we haven't even talked about like 2 of the other like really cool characters, though I think one of them does not fit this story at all, but we're gonna get there. But she's like, 5 men just entered the building and she grabbed the bag. I'm like, okay, so there is more serum. And I'm like, but I don't need more serum. I like literally, I get that it's part of his origin to be able to go up against Spider-Man. I do not need it in this moment. And speaking of things that I do not need, and this is going to put an end to the whole origin thing because there's other stuff to talk about. Greg Weisman, creator of the Gargoyles, did Spectacular Spider-Man, which is fantastic. I recommend it to everybody. But Greg Weisman has this real obsession with hybrid animal people. Not that he's a furry, but he does love it. And like when they made Wolf from the Pack into a Coyote Man, I actually think, no, Wolf. They made him into a Wolf Man. Coyote is the Australian character. I'm sorry, I'm getting all these characters from a different property there. That's what they did with Kraven the Hunter in Spectacular Spider-Man. They made him a lion hybrid. I've always hated that for the character. So I'm really happy that that's probably never going to happen to this character. I just have to say it. Because, like, it is...
Well, but so they do this stuff with him, and, like, let's talk about something that really worked for me in this movie. Aaron Taylor-Johnson and his physicality as Kraven in this movie is fucking phenomenal. And it comes from this idea that he does have this now animal, like, bit in him that he moves around like an animal, not a specific one. There's all sorts of different moves that he does that you're like, oh, that's very panther-like, or that's very monkey-like, or that's very like he's able to just kind of get around in all sorts of different ways, like an animal in the wild would be able to do, and it's awesome. So like watching him do that and all of that, tying that all to this idea that he has become like one with this like nature god, just all of that made sense and worked for me. So they kept kind of shoehorning in every couple of like for only a couple of scenes in this movie, but it was there, shoehorning in this weird serum story that made no sense to me.
What it is this Kraven the Hunter feels like the Kraven the Hunter that Ryan Coogler wanted to have in his Black Panther movies. In terms
I kept expecting the serum to have the fucking flower from Black Panther, that to be part of it.
Yeah.
I was convinced that was going to be the reveal. Not that I was convinced it was going to be the reveal in the movie, but I was convinced that there was going to be references enough for you to make that connection, but they're not allowed to say Black Panther in this movie because it's Sony, right? That was the first thing I fucking thought.
And it really kind of echoes how Cougar was like, I'd really like Kraven to be the big bad in these, and they're like, yeah, but we don't own that character. That's a Spider-Man character technically, so that's why we got Killmonger, because it's not like there aren't other people who get the Black Panther power, right? Like it is.
Yeah. I think Claw is also another good
Claw's another
some of the more less physical stuff in terms of Kraven, but in terms of more of the kind of the character concepts and origins, I think Claw is a little bit more.
And Claw does have deep connections because of all of his work with Vibranium that did turn him into a living sound creature in the comics. So it works. He found characters in the Black Panther mythos to fill it in, but then like everybody's talking about how Kraven almost showed up in the Black Panther movies. And I'm like, well, yeah, based upon the character that they presented here, like he's almost like a Black Panther, but because of the serum that mirrors the purple herb, as opposed to like, it worked for me in a lot of ways. Like,
yeah.
his physicality was so good. Oh.
Yeah, if they had tied it more into that, then it would have worked. But a couple of things that do work for me in this movie. Aaron Taylor Johnson, phenomenal, just all around, both as the character and the ways in which he the physicality and the fight scenes and everything, totally fucking awesome. I was not kidding before. The first 10 minutes of this movie of him in the Russian prison.
If I'm here more than 3 days, then you can take a shot. That was so good. Like that,
the one that got me, the reveal that got me was the body that they find later. It didn't even fucking occur to me that that's how he got into the prison.
Yeah, that was
But
good.
the reveal that how he got in is that he killed somebody and then sneaks in. That whole scene was phenomenal, right? So I was actually super on board for the first 10 minutes of this movie, and then immediately given what I consider to be the worst scene in this entire film. So I was just oh, okay, here it is. We're back to moderate expectations. I loved Calypso, the older version of her.
Yeah, Erin Dubois did a great job.
I wish we got a little bit more about her whole steez now. I love who she was in the world. I wish that there was just more of it, I guess. I wish they had explained more about the mysticism part of it with they are so quick to throw away the Serum story and the story about her and her grandmother and the tarot cards and all that I threw it away because the movie was telling me to. Knowing that she's actually deeply tied to that stuff I'm disappointed we didn't get more of that in the film. And then we have to talk about Russell Crowe, being fucking pitch perfect. And at the end of the day, I know a lot of people right now are calling out some of the goofiness of the final look of Rhino.
Love it.
But the story of the Rhino in this movie is pretty fun.
First of all, the look of him, what do you expect, right? How do you want a live action Rhino to look?
People don't like CGI, and they just are never going to, I'm convinced at this point. It is entirely this aspect of fuck CGI, it's not real filmmaking. And that is entirely what it comes down to. And even these VFX artists that I was talking about earlier that do these things on YouTube where they find bad VFX. I'm putting quotes around that because I hate when they label certain things bad because I don't always agree with their justifications for why they consider it bad. And then they go in and they fix them and they say, see how much better this would look. And then people all applaud and clap and all this shit and crap and throw it because they're fucking monkeys. But there's this idea that people think that computer generated imagery in film is just doesn't work for them. And if that's an aesthetic thing that they're just not into, I guess that's unfortunate for you because there's so much potential in it. And I think that's what this comes down to is people look at this character and look at the ways that it appears on screen, and it's just that immediate disconnect that this looks too cheesy to me. This looks like CGI to me, and it's just CGI has been used in film now for 30, 40 years, and it's been used extensively in film for the last 20. When are you going to get over this fact? I hate to say it, but this is just how we make movies now. People who don't use CGI are making a conscious decision not to. And that is also great. That is also awesome to watch. But at the end of the day, yes, they use computers to make movies. Sorry, they've been doing it now for almost half a century.
Yeah, I think Rhino looks goofy regardless, right? The idea of him being basically a rhino, but then he's got a human face is ridiculous. But in terms of modernizing a character like the Rhino, we saw how they tried to do it with Paul Giamatti in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where it's a big exosuit, right?
Oh, and it's the Star Wars problem that we always talk about all over again with that. People are now talking about how that was such a great concept for the character. They're just mad it wasn't in more of the movie. I remember distinctly at the time people talking about how stupid the idea was.
Right, especially since it wasn't a good looking battle suit. It was he'd be down laying with his face against the ground if it were to charge based on how we've seen it was designed. Regardless, though. So the fact that the character of the Rhino in the comics had a suit grafted to his skin. He exposed gamma radiation augmentations to give him strength and speed, and then they put him in a suit that they grafted onto his body. Like, that's what they did. So he can never take that off. It becomes his skin, essentially. And eventually it is destroyed and he gets one that is removable, right? That's the whole thing. But, like, no, his skin being the Rhino suit, I'm fine with that. And the fact that, like, whatever Miles Warren did to the Kraven the Hunter Rhino that mutates his skin to be a thick rhino-like hide, and he is completely impervious to all damage, and it has to be monitored and kept in check by a cocktail of... First of all, he's kind of like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, and I like that Bane, I'm not going to lie, right? Constantly in pain, having to, you know, take an anesthesia from his mask in order to survive. But, like, let's make him cooler with the fact that, like, he wears that goofy little backpack, and he looks like a freaking schoolboy, but, like, that backpack prevents him from becoming an unstoppable killing machine. That, like, yeah, sure, you're in pain the whole time, but you're also, you can't be killed, you have super strength and speed, and I guess you have horns growing out of your head. But you know what? That's just to make you the Rhino. Nobody's mad about that. Though everybody seems to be mad about it. But I honestly don't know why. I love a smart Rhino. Flowers for Rhino from the Web of Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man comic books, is one of the best comics I have ever read.
Is that a tasteless joke? I can't tell.
What?
The Flowers for Algernon reference. Is that tasteless? I can't.
Well, so in it, Rhino is given a treatment to increase his intellect.
I assumed.
That's what it's
get
about.
Why they're making the reference?
Okay, I'm just making
it's
sure.
Just the idea. It is a dangerous topic.
Yeah. So that's the whole thing. So he augments it, and he becomes the most deadly villain in the Spider-Verse. And the best part of it is, like, when he goes to Peter, he's like, I want to ask you to help me reverse this procedure because life is not worth living because I know everything. I mean, Peter, even the fact that you're Peter Parker, it was easy to decipher once I stopped and thought about it for a second. And I'm just like, I love it. Like, it's why it's such a good issue. So to combine the hulkish brute of the Rhino, and, you know, I say that because a lot of the experimentation is built off of what created the Abomination, but so that they don't wind up with another Abomination.
I know the Rhino as a Hulk character.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
Even villain necessarily. There's when Smart Hulk came around, and like he was kind of just always in Hulk form as Bruce just kind of in Hulk form talking as Bruce. There's a lot of stories of him and Rhino like meeting, not necessarily being best of friends, but like doing shit together.
Yeah, Rhino, I believe, started as a Hulk. Everybody eventually becomes a Spider-Man villain. That's the secret sauce of Marvel Comics. He's their most popular character, so eventually everybody fights against him. It's why, like, Ryan Coogler being like, well, no, Black Panther fought Kraven, and they're like, yeah, but he started as a Spider-Man villain, and therein lies the problem. Like, Rhino specifically was exposed to the same type of things that ended up turning Emil Blonsky into the Abomination. He is their second try to create a Russian Hulk. So it's very interesting to think about that stuff. And I dug that. I mean, they made him more of a Spider-Man villain with the Miles Warren of it all, right? The Jackal. The focal point, I imagine, of most of the Sinister Six had this version of the Sinister Six come together. I feel like Miles Warren would have been a big part behind it, especially since he made Rhino. The Rhino dies at the end of this movie, right? We're talking spoilers anyway, but he is killed, right? Like, that's what we're led to believe.
From what I can tell, from what I can see, what happens in this movie, he's killed. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's a comic book movie, so who the fuck knows? There's always that chance.
Everybody could come back to life, but he stabs him in his port, and then because it's the nature of it being a port, there'd be no way to stop the bleeding. Like, he stabs him with a pipe through a port, so like any blood would just drain out of that. And the fact that he is the Rhino, they can't stop the transformation any longer. I don't know. I liked the Rhino. I thought it was good. The character that I question being in this movie is the Foreigner.
Yes.
How much information do you know about the Foreigner?
Yeah, I don't really know why this character is brought in, because he's got a whole fucking story unto himself, and when they first kind of talk about him, there's this weird moment where you're like, ooh, is this going to be someone I know? And then it shows up and it's not. So that's kind of disappointing. And I don't mean like actor wise. I mean character wise. I was like, oh, that would be wild if they brought in somebody from one of the other movies, right? Like, what if it's, just like, what if it's Venom, right? Or Carnage, right? Like, that would have been fucking great if they fucking brought in Cass.
That'd have been awesome. I mean, even if they brought in, like, friggin' Madam Web. She could track him with her magical Madam Web powers.
Right. Yeah, if they had and who we talked about when we talked about Madam Web being kind of one of those characters that plays both sides depending on how she feels the world is supposed to work, she will work with anybody. So the idea that it could have easily been Madam Web, I expected her to be the one flying the plane in the beginning when they first the weird mysterious pilot that they keep talking to but Ellie, they never show the face of.
Her name is Ellie. I don't know who it's supposed to be. That was the one where I'm like, I'm not sure who you were meant to be. And they didn't do really any female Kravinoff except for the mother and stuff like that. But the Foreigner, I'm going to read you the powers and abilities of the Foreigner from Wikipedia. He has no superhuman abilities. However, he has trained his body to be in peak physical condition. He is stronger, faster, more agile, and has better reaction time than any Olympic athlete. He is adept in all known forms of martial arts and most forms of conventional hand weaponry. He is among the greatest pugilists in the Marvel Universe, similar in ability to Captain America and Wolverine. His skills are such that even without superhuman abilities, he is able to pull off seemingly inhuman feats of strength through intense concentration and has even battled Spider-Man to a standstill. He possesses a near mystic ability to place an opponent in a 10-second hypnotic trance through eye contact, which makes the opponent believe the Foreigner can move faster than the eye can see. He has hypnotized Spider-Man in this fashion, which lets Spider-Man disoriented and in a light trance for a few seconds, while the Foreigner ran away at what seemed to be nearly superhuman speeds. From Spider-Man's perspective, it appeared that the Foreigner had teleported away. The Foreigner uses this ability for evading enemies. He is a master of disguise and has assumed various identities all over the world. He's a brilliant strategist, tactician, and intelligence gatherer who has somehow escaped much notice from governments and their agencies, leaving it to Spider-Man other superheroes to handle him.
Okay, so let me ask before we go any further, really quick. There is an offhanded comment made at some point when Rhino asks him why he hates Kraven so much. He talks about his mentor. That is Bullseye, yes?
I believe so. Not in the comics. I don't think he has any...
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't think of who the fuck else he could be referring to. But he talks about, so for anybody that hasn't seen the film, doesn't plan on seeing the film, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like, he talks, when they finally sit down and ask him, why are you into this? Which is like an hour into this movie. Like, he's shown up 3 times, I think, and we don't really know much about him until this moment. He's asked, what is it, why do you hate Kraven so much? He tells a quick story about how Kraven killed his past mentor, and his past mentor who was one of the greatest assassins and all of this stuff. And all I could think was, he must be talking about Bullseye. Like, that's the only character I could think that he was referring to in that moment. And I was hoping that you would have some revelation here for me, so I'm a little...
No, I mean,
what a fucking wild thread. What, because he's another one that dies in this movie.
Yeah,
spoilers.
He definitely dies.
He ends up getting killed in this movie. So we're never going to learn more about him. Or it's like, what the fuck was the point of hiding who he's talking about? They make it so cagey. I was almost waiting for him to say something like, Norman Osborn was my dad or some shit like that. I don't like something, but like, no, they don't, they give you nothing and act as if they gave you this like deep, meaningful backstory in that moment.
So I didn't realize until just now reading through his power set, like, because I was familiar with the stuff and the fact that like he has no superhuman abilities. So we've talked a lot, right? If you go back to when I saw Morbius and I'm like, Morbius does that superhuman sin where the villain is just a better or evil version of the character that we're there to root for, right? In Morbius, it's Matt Smith's vampire. Like I'm just like you, Morbius, but I'm better in every way, right? Iron Man, it's the Ironmonger, Obadiah Stane, right? This film, literally by using the Foreigner, they brought in the better/evil version of Kraven the Hunter, Calypso, and the Chameleon. Like, he exists as a character in the whole universe to be better than all of them. And that is crazy to me. Because I knew that he was, like, kind of on the same level as Kraven in terms of, like, he has superhuman ability. He doesn't need to use the serum to do it. But then they always added that weird hypnosis thing that I've never fucking understood. Like, you say that he has no abilities.
To say that he has no superpowers, but then talk about this particular thing that he can do. That, I mean, you can get into the nuts and bolts of all of this shit, but at the end of the day, that's a superpower. That is a power that is superhuman. That is something that no other human is capable of doing. This dude can do. That is a superpower.
I mean, it's a learned mystic ability. That's where, like, it kind of, like, counters what Calypso can do, even though, like, she just uses mysticism the same way. I don't doubt that Stephen Strange could also learn the eye hypnosis trick. So, like, that's where it doesn't make it not a superpower, right? If it's a magic power, it still is superhuman in its existence. But I think the difference is that, like, he doesn't have anything ingrown. It's something that he learned. Like, even the Taskmaster, I would say, has the superpower of photographic agility. Is that what they call it? They have such a weird term for what he
ability
has.
the ability to copycat powers.
Anything
right?
that he's seen.
Like,
yeah.
he can, if he watches, or if they watch, I should say at this point.
Yeah.
If they watch anybody that for more than like a couple of minutes, they can learn basically their entire moveset. Yeah, like
they can learn anything by rote is kind of the best way to discuss the Taskmaster.
Yeah, but I mean, like, now we're getting into that weird territory of, is Batman technically a superhero, right? Because all of his abilities are learned abilities.
Well, I mean, my argument for Batman being a superhero, is that he regularly takes on villains who have superpowers. I think that a superhero, it's not just...
that logic,
yeah.
But then applying that logic to the Foreigner, he seems to regularly take on heroes that have superpowers.
Which would make him, he's definitely a supervillain. There's no doubt there. But it's just weird to say that he has no superpowers, but then be like, but if you catch him in the eye, he can hypnotize you for 10 seconds. Oh, that's a superpower, friend. I don't know who you're coming from. And like, and even in this movie, where they seem to only give him 3 seconds of hypnosis, he's able to do incredible things with that. Like, things that are, like, next level. And it's weird because, again, it's the Foreigner. It's not a well-known character. That's fucking Batroc in the beginning of Winter Soldier, right? Mm-hmm. Most people don't know who the fuck Batroc is. Which is sad, because I count him, like, amongst the top Captain America villains. But again, most people don't know who Batroc is. Batroc,
but they utilized him perfectly, right? Yeah. By having him get the shit kicked out of himself in the first 20 minutes of the film. That is what you do with a character at that level, right?
Yeah, he's like a C-level villain for a reason. Like, it's like, you need that type of thing. Even you can be in the like halcyon halls of a superhero's like cadre of villains. The pantheon. It's the word I could not think of there.
Rogues
Gallery. But still, like, not be a high level villain, like not a high power level. Like, Batroc is a low power level, so he's considered a lower tier villain. But that doesn't mean that he hasn't been a fucking thorn in the side of Captain America a bunch. And I mean, like, so the Foreigner was the only character in this movie for me that felt out of place. And that's saying something. Like, as much as, like, you kind of want to have someone who can counter Kraven in some ways, but, like, he doesn't counter Kraven in the ways of, like, him having a code or anything, right? Like, it's just like, oh, I can hypnotize people for 3 seconds, and then that 3 seconds, I keep moving, and then they're like, what the fuck happened? He was, I think, but, like, all the beautiful stuff in the jungles, the fact that Kraven took up residence in his mom's Russian sanctuary for animals and, like, was protecting against poachers. That moment made me fucking cheer in the theater of 5 people.
Here's where we're going to get to my final big issue with this
do.
movie, and I think emblematic of the entire Sony Sinister Six problem. At the end of the fucking day, all I could think by the end of this movie is how in any way were they going to try and justify that this was the Sinister Six? Craven is so clearly a hero. Yes, he gets called out rightly by his brother for being just kind of as bad as his dad because he has his own set of rules and he believes that's the right set of rules, which makes him kind of like you don't what makes you the end all be all. Why do you get to dictate what the code of honor is, right? Is essentially what his brother throws at him. A little heavy-handed and a little clumsy in the way in which it's held, especially because, as I mentioned in that moment, it seems to come out of nowhere. His brother seems to love him very much, and then suddenly, for one scene, is just the worst. So like, it's a wild fucking like flips, like script flip, like in the last moment there. But it is an interesting point that I wish they had kind of brought up sooner. They try to bring it up with Calypso, but she so quickly gets on board with his shit that conversation goes away. So like, they do all of this work in this movie to make Craven one of the coolest superheroes I've ever seen. How in any way was I ever supposed to turn on this and believe that he was supposed to be one of the bad guys? Not only one of the bad guys, but one, like part of the League of Doom, essentially for Spider-Man.
Legion of Doom.
And Legion of Doom. But the idea being, right? Like,
yeah, no, I get you.
He's supposed to be one of the worst that Spider-Man has to go up against. He's supposed to be a formidable foe. I can't even imagine this guy coming up against Spider-Man and them fighting for that long. I feel like after 10 minutes, the two of them would be buddies. Like, I am so thrown off by the way that this movie did this. And then I thought about this with all of this. This is where this whole thing kind of failed from the get-go, is that Sony was so hell-bent on doing this weird style Dark Avengers-esque kind of move with we're going to focus on the villains, we're going to focus on the rogues, we're going to do the Sinister Six movies rather than tell you Spider-Man stories. We're going to tell you these origin stories first, and then we're going to have them all come together for what one would assume would have been against Spider-Man, or in some weird way, were they going to be good guys in whatever Sinister Six movie that came together? Like, what was the plan? I am so fascinated and intrigued, and at the same time, completely understand why this didn't work. Because after watching Craven, all I wanted to do was see more Craven movies, but none of them where he has to become the bad guy.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I see him becoming the bad guy in, and like, even then, he's still saving the cat almost every time. 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, he's saving the cat. Like, literally, Craven the Hunter, the way they've designed him in this movie, he exists to save cats. I don't mean to like be a dick about it, but it's what he exists to do.
No, like on the nose. That's exactly
like on the nose. It's a bit on the nose about that, creating a character who exists only to save cats. But like, so you think about that. Like, if they eventually end up going to like, and they said their plan was to create a world where we could see the events of death in the family realistically happen. And I believe that, but that means that, like, so eventually he's going to have to kill his brother at some point, and, like, that kicks him off into it, or he makes an enemy of Spider-Man, and then at that point, like, the ends justify the means where he's fighting Spider-Man, and what they're hoping is that your love for Spider-Man is so great that you don't think about the fact that probably what Cravenoff is doing is justified in some way, it's just not the way that fucking Spider-Man would do it, which, like, that is the problem with Spider-Man. Spider-Man is held up like this mythical creature who can do no wrong, but he's one of the most emotional, like, shitty superheroes that Marvel has ever created. One of the reasons why he is so popular, why all roads lead to Spider-Man, is because of the fact that it's believable that, like, he acts like a regular human being so much of the time.
Superman problem.
Yeah.
He's the answer to the Superman problem. He is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful hero in this universe, in the Marvel universe. But unlike Superman, he has so many weaknesses. As strong as he is, and the fact that he is this powerful, at the end of the day, he still gets shit wrong. He still makes bad decisions. He still makes stupid decisions based on emotion and jealousy and stupidity. He is the answer to the Superman problem. Spider-Man is.
Yes.
So, like, yeah, so it's what makes him as beloved as he is because he is Superman, but he's Superman with flaws, and like that's awesome, and that's why we love him, right? But like, just this decision to focus on an entire series of films that were going to make us first fall in love with these villains, then somehow turn it around and turn it on its head, I don't know what the plan ever was for Sony.
Yeah.
But this movie fails at a fundamental level for me because at the end of this movie, I don't see him ever being the bad guy in these series.
Yeah.
They'd have to change who this character was at its core for me to believe it in any future iterations. And so they've failed from the moment they set foot on they set foot on the field.
I mean, and there's the MCU problem in so many words, is the fact that they can have all their standalone movies, but once all the characters come together, things we know about them will just have to be cast aside. Look at
Well, it's an even larger issue. Like it's that times a million.
Yeah.
Because at least you can justify that like they're heroes trying to do the right thing, so they may go against their personal code once they, once Iron Man meets Captain America and they start having debates about the right decision, then yeah, one of them might do something out of character, but ideally it's because it's in the name of good, right? For a villain, for a character to become a villain, they have to do something out of character, and it has to be the wrong choice. That is a much harder story to sell. Never mind 6 times over.
Yeah. And I don't see it happening. Think about the character that everybody is saying is now stranded in the Sony Spider-Man universe. Michael Keaton's Vulture. And this is how we're going to connect this all to the Variety article. When he meets up with Morbius at the end of Morbius, and he's like, maybe we could all get together and do some good. Like, that makes it sound like the Sinister Six was going to be a hero group, right? Like, what the fuck? Like, because Morbius isn't a villain at the end of his movie.
They're right. Like I said, this is a problem across all of them. I mean, I certainly would not look at Eddie in any way, especially now that we do after what we know with the final film and all that. But in no way would I look at Venom and think that particular symbiote is going to be one of the bad guys.
Venom,
of all of the work.
I don't look at Eddie Brock. I don't look at Venom, the symbiote, right? The Clinax actual symbiote that joins with Eddie Brock for them to become Venom. I don't think either of them have the malice of the Venom that we have seen in the comics. I think if that Kleinar symbiote were to bond with the Scorpion, I can't think of the Scorpion's name right now, or Flash Thomas the way that he has later on in the comic books, Matt Gorgon is the Scorpion, that it's just been influenced so much by its time with Eddie that it would never become the fucking human-eating monster that Mac Gorgon's Venom is. And I honestly don't know if it could be the Boy Scout that Flash Thompson's Agent Venom is. Right? Like, they've done so much for that character and what it is to Eddie. And I don't think that if they came up against Spider-Man in this universe, they would ever want to fight Spider-Man. The only way that you make a Sinister Six movie work with the people that we know exist in this universe is if Spider-Man is the villain for some reason. If you vilify Spider-Man. Which brings us to...
I will say that... or there's something bigger than Spider-Man, and this is where you get into the Dark Avengers conversation, right?
Right.
Something bigger than Spider-Man that if Spider-Man were to tackle would poison the well, essentially. So you already send in poisoned characters, poisoned heroes. But they didn't make villain movies. They made anti-hero movies.
Yes.
And I think they knew they were doing that from the get-go. I don't know how they ever thought this was ever going to be a hit with audiences, because diving this deep into making these known villains more anti-heroes was already a risky gamble. And it's hubris. It's pure hubris to think that this could have worked this way.
The weird thing is, I would now like to, with your permission, discuss the Variety article that came out that was a huge smoking gun about the Sony Spider-Man universe. And that is the fact that they could have used Spider-Man in these films from the get-go. But the reason that they didn't is they thought that it might confuse moviegoers. First of all, cast a new Spider-Man. There's the answer. Just don't make it Tom Holland Spider-Man, right? Andrew Garfield exists. I cannot think of a single one of these 6 films that came out that would not have been like made somehow better. I like all 6 of these movies, by the way. I'm not a person who's like, oh, I have something that I enjoy about all 6 Sony Spider-Man universe films. And all of those films could only have been made better if Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man were a part of it. Legitimately, Madam Web, the biggest plot holes in Madam Web is why the fuck is this guy trying to kill these people? You add in the fact that he's trying to kill Spider-Man before he's fucking born, boom. That is a fucking compelling story. It's fucking Terminator.
All I heard about Madam Web was that the reason that it was strangled by the fact that it couldn't mention Spider-Man.
Yeah.
All I heard was that the reason that people left, right, and center were trying to justify, well, it's not really their fault. At the end of the day, they couldn't talk about Spider-Man. So what, like, and it's like,
first apparently of all, not the case.
And also now we know that might not have been the case.
Like, apparently they could have done it. They're just like, but let's not do it. And there's also the fact that, like, Kraven was supposed to be the first Sony Spider-Man universe film after Venom. It was supposed to be Venom and then Kraven the Hunter. So the fact that it weirdly becomes the last movie is so strange to me. But the fact that they could have used Spider-Man, right? Which we know, right? We all thought it was, they could use an animated Spider-Man. But that doesn't make sense either, because for so long, Disney owned the animated rights to Spider-Man. That's why they're not allowed to do like more spectacular Spider-Man stuff, because of what was tied up in television and animated rights of the character. So the fact that they made 2 Spider-Verse movies that have a Peter Parker in them, they have 2 Peter Parkers in them, for Christ's sake. You got Nick Miller, fucking Jake Johnson Spider-Man, and you have Chris Pine Spider-Man. In a day, like you couldn't have those characters if Sony has, we can't use Spider-Man for anything. You had 2 Spider-Men that were Peter Parker Spider-Man, right? If those movies were just freaking Ghost Spider and Miles Morales Kid Arachnid stuff, right, in a Spider-Man movie, then I'd believe some of that credence. It's so weird that it wasn't about the guy wanting to kill baby Spider-Man before he's born. Right? Because in 2003, it would have worked out, right? The only justification for that being in 2003, and that has to now be a joke from the producers, is so we could use Toxic by Britney Spears. The fuck? Like, it just, I don't know. And it's like, there's all these little allusions to Spider-Man in these movies. They should have just had him in there. No audience member is going to be, like, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you can use Spider-Man, literally one of the most identifiable and most popular characters that currently exists, and you're not going to use him in your Sony Spider-Man universe? I don't get it. That, like, maybe that article's being misinterpreted, but, like, for it to come out the day that Kraven came out and talk about, we could have used Spider-Man, we just didn't want to confuse the audience. There has to be more there. Right? There has to be.
I mean, the thing is like, all we've been hearing, it does, man, this is like a whole other episode.
I know.
There's all this stuff about, like, all of this stuff about trying to bring Spider-Man back into the MCU, and about how they had to do these handshake deals with Sony, and then it almost all fell apart. And then we hear that famous story at this point of Tom Holland getting drunk and like cold calling fucking Eisner in tears to be like, please help me fix this, and then they fix it because he loves Tom Holland so much. Like there's all of this stuff that we've been hearing over the years that has been this blame game back and forth about, we could have, who owns the rights, why we can't do this, why we can't do that. I mean, we've just talked about it earlier. Like, Ryan Coogler trying to make Black Panther, being told, no, sorry, like, those rights aren't ours. And, like, we've heard that a bunch over the years with Marvel movies on both sides. We can't do that because that's technically not this character that we own, or technically that's an X-Men character, technically that's like, all of this shit that's been going on in terms of who owns these characters. It's been a fucking mess. And so, like, I kind of wholeheartedly believe that Sony this entire time has had the rights to Spider-Man, because that's what's been fucking up so many other things in so much other math. Like, I kind of always assumed they had the rights to Spider-Man, and that they were just, and it sounds like I was right, is like, they were being fucking stubborn about not wanting to just get out there and do that again, because they had gotten burned so hard on the Amazing Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, in that same article, it's like, Tom Holland can't apply as his Spider-Man in your movies. Make another Spider-Man. First of all, you have a Spider-Man waiting in the wings.
You do, yeah.
Like
Clearly, who likes playing the character, came back and did it for the MC. Yeah, you know. I mean, the only thing I can think is that a shitty Sony move is they didn't have any desire to have one actor that they would have had to tie to all of these movies, right? Like, if they had decided to put Spider-Man in these movies, that would have meant that they would have been needing an actor for at least 6 films, if not more, because they were clearly planning more if this worked. That means that they would have had to tie themselves to someone, much in the ways in which we saw Disney gladly doing that with so many people. Sony didn't want to get into that game. They were happy to say to these people, we're going to give you a shot. We're going to do the one movie, see how that does, and if we can, we'll do some sequels. Saw what happened with Bane here. What's his nuts?
Venom. Tom Hardy.
No, Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
Like getting the ability to come back for a couple more movies because things worked out so well. So like we're happy to sign people on for the potential of. But what they would need to do with someone in that case is definitively say to them, like, we're making 6 movies with you, and if this doesn't work, then you're probably going to get compensated in some way. And they didn't want to do that.
They didn't want to compensate in some way.
To one particular actor. It's the only reason. Like they can say we didn't want to confuse the audience all we want. We know that that's bullshit. They clearly didn't care about that because all they did was confuse audiences with all these movies. So if that was really their goal, they failed at it spectacularly.
Yeah. I mean, amazingly, ultimately, no, it's really crazy. I don't, especially something like Madam Web, where like he's not even born yet, but we all know that. And if that guy is just trying to kill Mary Parker before she gives birth to Peter Parker, that's incredible. That's just like an incredible story.
And it justifies so much about what I did, but about
what doesn't work in that movie for
that
people.
Film.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Is you make it the Terminator, right? Whereas they like, and that's the other thing is that a lot of these films were like genre film first, also kind of like let's start with this movie first, right? It's the Terminator, but that's it. Madam Web is the Terminator. Freaking Kraven the Hunter. There's so much Godfather in this fucking movie.
And Batman. I mean, to be frank.
That's not. There's just so much like other existing stuff. Morbius is like a vampire. I think I don't know. Like I just don't know what they were doing. And if it is true that they could have used a different Spider-Man, just not Tom Holland's Spider-Man, I don't know why they wouldn't do it. It goes back to the reveal that we were going to cast J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson in Venom, but we decided against it. He was on board for it, but then at the last minute, we're like, we're not going to do it. We might confuse audiences. And then it turns out that he's a friggin' anchor being, and J. Jonah Jameson across the multiverse looks and sounds like J.K. Simmons. Like, fuck. It just... Ultimately, I enjoyed these films. I really enjoyed Kraven. I'm a little undecided on how you felt about the movie. I know there are moments you liked, but overall, I'm not sure.
I mean, I think that it is one of the better films in this outing by Sony, but I'll be honest, right now, I don't really know how I feel about the movie much either, because there is a lot of this movie that I really enjoyed, but it is also so full of so many fantastically beautiful examples of why Sony kept fucking this up every step of the way. It is, if in the future, when people want to talk about the Sony Spider-Man and specifically the Sony Sinister Six films, when they want to talk about these in the future, this might be the one that I say, watch that one, because it's going to give you all of the good stuff and all of the bad. If you watch just the Venom movies, you might mistake the series as actually just misunderstood. But there's legitimately just some wild ass business decisions and movie making decisions that completely undercut any of the potential that this franchise had. And Kraven the Hunter is emblematic of all of it.
And it being weirdly the first film, planned to be the first film to follow up Venom, and then it ultimately being the last film of the SSMU, at least based upon everything that's in the water right now, it is even more representative of the entire trip that we went through. Because again, like them being so beholden to, but his serum origins and his connection to Calypso, yeah, that's fine. But it feels out of place with the rest of the movie that you made. Dimitri becoming the actual fucking chameleon, as opposed to like being really good at imitating people, it is a wild move that now ultimately will go nowhere. And then having a heel turn that just...
heel turn that is insignificant. It's not even plot significant that it happens. He just has a heel turn in the last 2 minutes of this movie just because.
Well, I mean, it might be because, like, he knows that his brother killed their father, right? So there's no way for me to get his approval. But it's
if
so
they had
weird.
leaned into that more, if they had really, like, because he doesn't love his father either. So
that's
like,
true. He should have killed the father.
He'd be happy that his father got killed, right?
Yeah.
But I think the bigger one, the bigger thing for me is they should have leaned more into the reveal that the people that kidnapped him and everything that happened to him happened because they were technically there for Craven. They were there for Sergei. And it was because Sergei wasn't there, which is an offhanded thing said by the Rhino at some point. Yeah. He's like, it was a mistake. You weren't even supposed to be the one that they were supposed to grab. They were supposed to grab him, and he wasn't there, so they grabbed you instead. And so it worked for me, but you weren't even supposed to be the one that was supposed to be in this situation. If they had leaned into the idea that from that moment that he learned that he suddenly had kind of started to develop kind of this I'm always being left by my brother kind of feeling, because that is what his story.
That's what it is. His story is that essentially I'm going to step up now. Like, even it's one thing that our shared father does not respect me and may never respect me because I'm technically his bastard son, right? They're talking about Fredo not actually being a biological son. Going back, it all connects to The Godfather and the stupid things that I've said about that movie.
It's very much that crime drama family story.
So it is that thing where, like, it's one thing if your father will never accept you, but literally the bad guys, like, oh man, I'm so sorry this fucking happened. We wanted your brother. You're fucking nothing. We're going to use you to get your brother now since we have you. But honestly, you're shit on my shoe 9 times out of 10.
Like, well, and the other side of that, story is that every time something bad has happened to him, it has happened because his brother has left him to it.
Yes.
Right? Like, he just keeps getting left to it by his brother. So he develops from that moment, that realization, it clicks in that I don't think my brother actually loves me. I think my brother cares more about himself and his own safety and figuring his own shit out than he has ever cared about me. But they don't say any of that.
None of that.
They don't dive into any of that. Especially not in the moment. It isn't until that final scene where he says anything remotely against his brother, and it's all focused on his father and the fact that he let his father die, or like they say it was a hunting accident, like that whole line. Who gives a shit? Your father was an awful man. You hated him more than Sergei did, I think.
Right, and which is why I think in that moment you couldn't even leave me that. Right, you had to be the one to kill our father. You didn't let me be the one to finally, now that I have this newfound like sense of self and my purpose and abilities, like you took that from me too.
Yeah. See, again, potential.
Potential. It's all potential. Yeah.
This completely just squandered. And that is the Sony story from the get-go. And potential squandered by hubris. That is the Sony story from all the way back in the Sam Raimi days on. It is everything that Sony has ever done with the Spider-Man franchise has been potential squandered by hubris.
Yeah, imagine if they just let him make his Spider-Man 3 instead of being like, you have to put Venom in it. Like, what the fuck? I don't know. All right, there is one other thing I got to talk about. It's a quick thing, and it's a good way to wrap this episode up. It's about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Rita's Rewind. Don't fucking give that game any money. Let that game fail. My God, did they release a broken video game? In terms of have you heard anything about this, Sejohn? Do you know anything outside of what I have told you?
No. Outside of what you and I have talked about, I have not heard anybody talk a peep about this game. As far as I could tell, it's like nobody else is playing it. So
yeah. So all of the Rangers are just palette swaps of each other. There is no reason to play as Billy over Kimberly. They all have the same power level, the same speed, and the same basic moveset. Their sprites are different, so they're not true palette swaps. Like Kimberly walks with a different stance than Trini, but dear God, they all play the same. And Shredder's Revenge, right, which is literally why all of these IP beat 'em ups are coming out, every turtle had a reason. Like, Donatello had the best reach, but he wasn't very strong. Raphael, he was fast, but he wasn't very strong. Like, it all evened out using the characters. It's a big part of playing that game. If you're playing alone, who you're going to play as.
But you never have to rebalance your game if every character is the same.
Right? Yep. But the fact that they are charging $35 for this game, right, that is less in-depth than, like, Streets of Rage 4 was $24.99. Shredder's Revenge, I believe, was $24.99. There's no justification for the Power Rangers game to be $35, other than the fact that it's come out a couple of years later. It plays badly. In its release, it was not released with online. That came in a later patch. Its online is still only 2 players at a time, though Steam says if you have 3 people at one location and 3 people at another location, you can co-op online with 6 people. Isn't that lovely? Huh? Right? You got to get 2 couch co-op set. I mean, actually, you have 6 people together and 2 computers, but still. And also, you have to beat the game once in order to have 6-player online, because the Green Ranger is locked behind beating the game. It's just baffles me. Also, in its release state, the way that they differentiate the difficulties: easy, you have unlimited continues. Normal, you have 10. Hard, you have 5. And then there's a headache mode. I haven't unlocked yet because you have to finish the game on hard mode. I'm never going to play this game on hard mode. I just do not care to go back to it. But, like, if you quit the game, right? Like, if you got to a level and you're like, all right, I'm going to stop it, it takes away a continue from you. So you don't want to sit down and play a 2.5-hour game in one sitting. Oh, well, you're going to forfeit one of your continues.
Wild choice.
So I imagine that was a mistake because there's been a couple of patches, but I haven't been able to find anything about it. But that is the thing.
Well, it feels like maybe somebody along the line forgot to, like, wire in, like, a workaround from restarting takes away a continue. So, like, you die and restart, obviously it takes away a continue. But if you pause and restart, that shouldn't be the same. That shouldn't be the same algorithm.
That should not be the same thing. Exactly.
Different string in the code, right?
Right. So I don't know if it's been fixed yet, but we ended up, we played on normal. And here's the other thing. If you play co-op, there's no save file. Because Dale and I did online co-op. We got to the ninth level on normal mode. The 9th level was a monster. Obviously, they're all monsters. It's Rita stuff. But, like, in terms of what you have to do, like, it was just long and difficult. And we'd been playing for a while, and we were going to record Hotel Transylvania 3. Our Hotel Transylvania 3 episode is out there and available, by the way. So we had to stop. So we're like, let's take a stop here. We're about halfway through the game. You know, we're not loving it, but we can finish this. Yesterday, when we went to go to it, there's no save file. If you play co-op online, you have to start from the beginning every time. That is insane to me.
That is wild. That's crazy.
That's just bad game. So, like, we're like,
also seems like that was maybe like a forgotten thing. Like somebody forgot to turn on.
Right? But it's weird because, like, you have 3 save files, though if you run out of continues because of the nature of what we just talked about, you can no longer continue on your save file, which is just insane. It's just a locked thing that you can't play anymore.
Wait, so it's saving when you lose? It's not I would imagine you'd have to go back to wherever you save from, and you would just have your continues back.
Right,
that's not how it works.
But say you get to the final level and you use your last continue, right? But you can't go back to the save when you started that level and, like, you had 2 continues left. It just says you're out of continues. This game cannot be started.
That's fucking wild.
Yeah, crazy. Just absolutely crazy that it just, like, doesn't do it. Also, continues, it's a beat 'em up, Sejohn. Continues do not start you where you were. They bring you back to the start of the level, which is insane in a beat 'em up. Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to emulate a beat 'em up, or are you trying to emulate something else? Like, continues are supposed to start you where you were, not take you back to the beginning of the level. Like, it's just all of these choices that were made. And I'm going to talk about the final boss here. The bosses are not great. It's a lot of hurry up and wait bosses, which I fucking hate. We're like, oh, I do give them credit when the bosses are doing something you cannot hurt them during. Their life meter turns silver to show that they're shielded and can't take damage. But, like, a fight should not just be that, and then you have your opportunity to do some damage, and then a bunch of, like, avoidance of the enemy while they're invincible, and then, oh, now you can do damage again. Like, that's not fun.
Every boss, at least.
Like, and every boss has that section in it. Every single boss has that. The Megazord section, which we talked about, I'm nervous. How are you going to do that with multiple people? One person is in control, and either they fill a block of the super power sword, or if they run out of health, someone else who's playing co-op steps in and controls the Megazord. So if you have 5 people playing, and only one person's pretty good at the Megazord, like, all you gotta do it. The Megazord fights are like Punch-Out, but they make no sense. Like, when you can or cannot do damage is crazy. You can run. You run up to the boss, and you think, oh, I can punch them, and they'll just jump away from you. And if you keep running, like, you can get stuck in a cycle where that's all you're doing. It just... And the last thing I need to talk about is the final fight against Robot Rita. Sejohn, if you could think of the worst type of boss fight to emulate in a beat-em-up, what do you think the worst type of boss fight would be for that?
In a
beat 'em up. So from like another boss fight in all the video games, right? Another style of boss fight to then emulate in a beat 'em up.
I guess like a bullet hell I really wouldn't want to deal with, but I think that's kind of the point with some of those.
I mean, those do happen now, right? The third boss, Bones, Mr. Bones, is a bullet hell sort of level. It's not a lot of fun.
I'll tell you this, a fucking like travel level, like the fucking sewer levels or the Battletoads
like the
right?
jumps? Oh my god. That is the only thing that could be worse. Robot Rita is a Ganon style tennis match where you have to hit a projectile back and forth. And you do that until you break her shield, and then you can do damage to her. And then she does it differently. Like before, she would send it out to be a little slow. Now it's fast, or now it bounces. It's ridiculous. I'm just like, this is in my beat 'em up? Why am I fucking Link to the Past in my beat 'em up? It doesn't work. And it certainly doesn't work when you have 2 people playing.
I mean, it also sounds like it would be worse if more people were. Can you imagine that kind of fight?
With 5,
like, you basically would have to have 4 people stay back and 1 person, or 5 people stay back and 1 person go forward to fight the boss. You essentially have to go in one at a time, kind of like the Megazord fight you were talking about.
Yeah, like it's and then the other thing is that they have this whole thing where she's using time disruption crystals. So you find time disruptors in levels, and you have to destroy them before they detonate. And when they detonate, it's like Groundhog Day. It rewinds like 30 seconds of gameplay. And then the damage you've done to it is still there, but you have to redo everything. The only nice thing about that is that if you die and that happens, you can get lives back. But it is like not a fun mechanic at all. To be like, oh, you didn't kill this one thing fast enough. Now you have to do everything again. Yes, the damage you did to this thing is still there, but you still have to fight. Like, other enemies are part of the fights. It's like they made every wrong decision with this beat 'em up. It's not fun. It's expensive. And there's like, I have no reason to go back to it, right? There's no reason. I'm not like going to learn another character, right? Oh, Kimberly's faster. I'm going to want to play it as her. They're all the same stats. Why do I want to play through as the Green Ranger? He's not stronger. At least Sejohn with Shredder's Revenge, he had 7 stat points as opposed to the 6 stat points that every other character had. So they're like, it was fun to get to play as Sejohn because he was stronger than everybody based on that. Green Ranger is another palette swap. I just don't get it. So I just needed to get that out there because there's been a lot of it. And I'm also going to share some good news, right? Pampus and Celine, I raved about Pampus and Celine, and I'm coming to terms with the fact that there's a good chance it's going to be my game of the year for 2024. though we have a couple of weeks left and I have a couple of games that I'm going to play, it has save slots. And I did not know that. But they recently, in one of the patches, switched it. In the options menu, there's a profiles thing. And each one of those profiles is a different save slot. And they've since switched profiles to save slots so that you can like understand what that is. I don't think that save slots in a video game should be buried 2 menus deep. I'll be honest with you. But it does mean that I am going to get to play through Pampus and Celine solo because I only ever did it co-op with Dale. And I've been really wanting to do it solo but not ruin all of our progress. But additionally, Dale and I are planning on playing through with me as Celine and her as Pampus, switching it up to see how it changes. So, like, that's just some good news in the co-op. Also, I've been complaining about this buffet of bad taste that beat-em-ups have been giving me, and I was recommended Ultimate Double Dragon, which is a homebrew game. I'll send a link to it in the supplemental materials for this episode. Completely homebrew, guy built it. It's unlicensed, but, you know, and it's right on, like, itch.io, so you can download it. You can choose how much you want to pay for it. We did 1 level of it. It was already more in-depth and more fun than any other beat-em-up game that I've played in the later half of the year. So there are some good ones out there. But that's because people are upset that Double Dragon Revive with the Game Awards. I'm so happy we didn't talk about the Game Awards this episode. I'm just going to be straight about that. Its release date is October of 2025. And a lot of people are mad about that. Whereas I'm like, that game did not look ready to be released. I'm glad they're waiting another year for it. Because I'm tired of like buying beat 'em ups.
People have got to stop getting shitty about game release dates because like look at what happened with Cyberpunk. It now considered to be a pretty great game by a lot of people. Yeah. But like, did that teach people anything? Like you push and push and push on people in all these different worlds. And so they put a game out and it's not ready, and then you're fucking pissed because the game's not working. And it's just like, well, yeah, what did you expect? We all knew the game wasn't ready.
They admitted the game wasn't ready. Man, that brings me back to Stadia memories, playing Cyberpunk on Stadia. I'm a little sad that I owned Cyberpunk briefly and now I don't. Even if I got my money back, I don't know if I could ever rebuy it either, based on everything that I know. But that's a me problem. But you're right. Yeah, like here's the only issue that I have with that Double Dragon Revive stuff is a digital game is probably not going to have a physical release outside of like something like limited run. Pre-orders are available for a game that doesn't come out until October. That is a digital release.
Well, and that's far enough out that, you know, that probably means it won't come out till Christmas or possibly even 2026. Yeah,
like I would not want to pre-order Double Dragon Revive right now. And I certainly would not recommend that anybody do it either. Like,
yeah,
just that just seems like a bad idea. All right, I think that's it. Anything else that we missed that you want to make sure we talk about this episode? Kind of want to go 4 more minutes so we're the same length as Wicked, but we don't have to do that to these people.
No, but like for anybody thinking that we were full of shit on that exact thing, like it is out there that the runtime of Wicked is 2 hours and the play is 2 hours and 30 minutes with normally a 15 to 20 minute intermission depending on what the standard is at your theater. But 2 hours and 30 minutes, meaning that this half alone is already 10 minutes longer. That does include credits, as Devon pointed out, but like, yeah, I'm so curious to see what happens with the second half. We'll leave it at that because we'll clearly talk about it again next year.
Yeah, when it happens, right? And we'll probably see it sooner than like a couple of weeks in. Because here's what they could do. Like, I'll make a lot of money. First of all, my mother's like, I don't know why they didn't just release them at the same time. Now, the reason for that is because they want that money to be in 2 fiscal years. So, like, just to answer that question, anybody might be asking.
Yep, it all comes down to the fucking budget.
It all comes down to the budget.
Every decision is about the money. Yeah.
Secondarily, there's no way that you could have Wicked Part 1 and Wicked Part 2 in cinema at the same time and avoid having one person, and all it takes is one voice, who accidentally goes to the theater and buys tickets to Part 2, not having seen Part 1, and raising a huge stink about it.
Oh, I'll tell you this. They wouldn't even buy a ticket. They would get there thinking they showed up for Wicked Part 1, be told, oh, sorry, this is actually the second part. Not even spend money and raise a stink. Money would not even change hands. And you would have somebody that would be in that situation and still be loud enough that it would be a problem, right?
Right.
And to be honest, they'd be pretty justified because, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, no, they'd be justified.
It's
but also, I don't know what your experience has been like at the cinema, Sejohn, but like, I don't trust any of the people who work at my local cinema to say to somebody, well, this is actually part 2. Like you
That's
just
all, yeah.
like that, or like you're like, I'll have a ticket for the 2:00 Wicked, and they end up sending you a ticket for Wicked Part 2. Like,
Yeah, right.
like there's just too much of the human element that could not have them in theaters at the same time. Because I thought at once she's like, it's weird that like, I understand if they don't want to make it one package, but if I could go Friday night and see part 1 and then Saturday night and see part 2, and they're both in theaters at the same time, I'm like, you might get that option next year, Mom, but I honestly don't know if that's going to happen. What I would really like is if they did like a special presentation that was both of them together. And ideally like in April. Like I don't fucking...
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is why are they waiting till next Christmas to really? Yeah, but yeah, there's I don't doubt that there will be at the very least there will be some cobbled together double features of it at your local cinemas.
Yeah.
Like they'd be silly with my cinema. Honestly, the line of cinemas around me out here, Larry H. Miller Megaplexes, love you guys. Every seat is one of those lean back seats, and some of them are even better. But they half of their movies now are old movies. They're doing Back to the Future. They do Studio Ghibli runs. They do all sorts of stuff. Like if at any given time that I go look at movie theaters now, it is guaranteed that 2 or 3 of the offerings are going to be an older film that they're re-showing. So like it'd be wild that if you didn't have somebody out there putting together a Wicked Part 1, Part 2 double feature day, because like I mean that's just that money just
that's money itself in the bank, right? You're printing money at that point. That's how I would. I don't even know. I don't know if I would see it that way the first time. I kind of want to experience part 2 as a standalone and then see both of them back to back. But I don't know. Like, I just have a lot of questions. But we'll deal with this in a year. Until then, this has been the Say Report. I'm Devon Decker. He's Sejohn Sarowik, because I don't think we ever said your proper name. If you want to keep the conversation going, we have our Discord, invitations to which are available wherever we are on social media, which is currently Facebook and X, formerly Twitter. Or you can always send an email to thesayreport@gmail.com, and we'll hook you up with an invitation. Or we can just correspond like it's the turn of the millennium, and you can send us emails and we'll answer you back. As always, if it's just for my eyes, Devon Decker, or his eyes, Sejohn Sarowik, just put our first name in the subject line and it will be distributed appropriately. That being said, thank you so much. We're going to do something with Christmas movies next episode, but until then, William, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Sarowik. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.